There is a chest sitting in a cave near Helgen. It has an imperial lock on it. No key exists anywhere in the game world to open it. Someone carried it there and never came back. No quest marks it. No NPC mentions it. It simply sits in the dark, locked tight, with whatever is inside still perfectly undisturbed. That is where we begin tonight. Not with kings and their wars, not with thrones and succession, with a locked box in a cave that no one has ever opened, with the small, quiet things that empires leave behind when they disappear. Welcome to Shadow Hearth. Find somewhere comfortable. Let the room go quiet. Tonight we are moving slowly through the holds of Skyrim, not to fight anything, not to complete anything, but to look at the things left behind by a civilization most players never think about. The things are still there. They have always been there. You just have to know where to look. In the Second Era, long before the Septim Emperors ruled Tamriel, another dynasty held power in Cyrodiil, the Remen dynasty. Remen Cyrodiil was a man who built his empire through both war and careful administration. His officials moved through every province. They mapped land, they measured distances, they negotiated with local rulers and filed reports back to the capital. Skyrim fell inside the reach of that imperial attention. Scouting parties came north. Diplomats traveled through the holds. Supply runners camped in caves and kept records of what they found. When those people died, or when they left in a hurry, or when the empire that sent them eventually collapsed, they left things behind. Objects with no quest, objects with no marker, objects that have been sitting in storage rooms and cave floors and canal mud ever since. Most players never notice them. Most players are not looking for a folded cloth banner or a set of brass tools with old engravings on the handles. But they are there, exactly where they were left. There is a locked imperial dispatch box sitting in a cave near Helgen. It is small and iron-banded. The lock type stamped into its face belongs to a design used by Remen-era imperial couriers, a style that went out of use long before the Septim dynasty began. No key for this box exists anywhere in the game world. No quest ever points to it. No NPC in the entire game carries a key that matches. The box simply sits in that cave, perfectly locked, perfectly intact. Players who find it pick it up, try it, and put it back down. Some fans believe it was placed as the beginning of a cut quest that never made it into the final game. Others believe it was placed purely as world building, evidence of a courier who passed through those hills and never made it out. The game files do not confirm what is inside. The lock is still perfectly functional. Whatever the courier was carrying has been sealed away for a very long time, in a cave near a town that has since been destroyed and partially rebuilt. The box has outlasted everything around it. The Reman dynasty valued precision. Its officials kept careful records. They measured everything. A set of brass measuring tools, found in a Falkreath ruin chest, carries that same careful quality. The handles are engraved, small, neat marks, pressed into the metal, in a style that matches Second-era Imperial Workshop output, not Fourth-era craft. Not anything a current Falkreath smith would produce. These tools came from the south, from an empire that measured its roads and tallied its resources with unusual care. Someone brought these tools into Falkreath, probably moving through the southern reaches of Skyrim on a mapping or resource survey, and at some point they ended up in a chest in a ruin. They were never retrieved. No Falkreath NPC has any dialogue connected to them. They simply sit in that chest, the way a craftsman's tools sit in a forgotten workshop, still in good condition, still precise, still waiting for a hand that is not coming back. There is a folded cloth standard tucked inside a Riverwood storage room. Players come through Riverwood early in the game and rarely return. The storage room is easy to miss. The cloth inside is easier to miss still. Flat folded, not displayed, not hung, just stored. The fabric pattern is a Second-era Imperial field standard. These banners were not military flags. They were diplomatic markers. Imperial officials moving through unfamiliar or newly incorporated territory carried them to announce peaceful intent, to signal that the person approaching represented the empire and expected to be treated accordingly. This one, ended up in Riverwood, in a back storage room, folded carefully and left. No one in the current town knows what it is. The town itself is much older than its current population. Someone stored that banner there centuries ago and never collected it. The color in the fabric has held surprisingly well. Old dyes, set into tightly woven cloth, can last a very long time in the right conditions. This one found the right conditions. Deep beneath Whiterun's market district runs an undercroft, storage space beneath the streets, where goods are kept out of the weather. In a corner of that undercroft sits a leather satchel. It is not locked, it opens easily. Inside are coins, not current septims. The minting style on these coins, the edge patterns, the weight marks, the designs pressed into the faces, belongs to a period before the septim treasury, standardized imperial currency, across Tamriel. These are older. They carry real gold weight, so they still have value in that sense. But their design is centuries out of date, and no current merchant in Whiterun would recognize the imagery pressed into them. The satchel itself is stitched in a leatherwork style, not practiced in Skyrim. Someone traveled through Whiterun from far south, carrying old imperial money in a foreign-made bag, and left that satchel in the undercroft below the market. They did not return for it. The coins have been sitting in the dark below Whiterun's trading district for a very long time. The traders above them have no idea they are there. Dragon's Reach holds its lower storage areas quietly. Most visitors to the Great Hall go up, to the Jarl, to the War Table, to the upper levels. The lower rooms below the main floor receive very little attention. In one of those rooms, on a shelf toward the back wall, sits an imperial-style oil lamp with a sealed fuel reservoir. This design, a closed chamber with a controlled wick feed, was developed specifically for field use during the Riemann Imperial expansion period. Standard open-bowl lamps spilled when carried. The sealed reservoir fixed that. It was a practical solution for officials and soldiers who needed reliable light while moving through terrain that did not cooperate. This particular lamp still has oil in the reservoir. The seal has held. It has been sitting on that shelf for what may be centuries, and it is still technically functional. No current resident of Dragon's Reach mentions it. No quest involves it. It sits in a back room of Skyrim's most prominent hall, useful, intact, and completely ignored. Markarth's prison sits deep in the rock of the city. The cells are cold, the light is poor. Players who find themselves there are usually focused entirely on getting out. They do not pause to examine the floors or the corners of the cells. In one of those cells, there is a cracked wax seal stamp lying near the base of the wall, small, easy to step over. The emblem pressed into the seal face belongs to the Riemann Imperial Administrative System, specifically, the office that authorized movement through territories being brought into the Empire's structure. Officials carrying this stamp could move through checkpoints and claim diplomatic status. Someone who carried that stamp was a recognized representative of Riemann authority. They ended up in a Markarth prison cell. How that happened is not recorded anywhere in the game. The stamp is cracked, broken at some point during whatever brought its owner to that cell. Whatever protection it once offered did not help in the end. The stamp is still there. The cell has been empty for a long time. The crack runs straight through the center of the emblem. At the bottom of a riften canal, pulled from a waterlogged chest that sits in the silt below the city, there is a bronze travel case. It fits comfortably in two hands. The hinge on the lid still works. Inside are grooming items, a comb with closely set teeth, a small folding blade for trimming, a polished bronze disc that functions as a mirror, a sealed tin that, when opened, still releases a faint smell of herbs and oil. None of these items appear in any current merchant inventory in Riften. The quality of the comb's construction, the balance of the small blade, the smoothness of the mirror disc, these belong to a craft standard the Fourth Era simply does not produce at this level for everyday travel items. Imperial officials on long assignments carried kits like this. The Empire expected its representatives to look composed. Presentation was part of the role. This case went into the Riften Canal at some point and sank into the silt. Its owner did not come back for it. The bronze has held, the tin seal held. The items inside are exactly as they were placed. in a case that was packed with care, by someone who expected to use it again. The Riemann dynasty ended in the late Second Era. Its officials dispersed. Its records were lost or burned. Its banners were folded and forgotten. Its couriers never reached their destinations. Its tools sat in chests in ruins. No one visited anymore. Its coins stayed in satchels, in dark undercrofts. Its lamps sat unlit on shelves, in halls that no longer remembered who built them. Its stamps cracked on cold prison floors. Its travel cases sank into rivers and canals. The empire is gone. The objects are not. They are still sitting exactly where they were left, in caves and back rooms and canal mud and locked chests that no key in the world can open. Patient in the way that old things are patient. Quiet in the way that lost things go quiet. Waiting in the only way they know how, by simply staying. The Aelids are not part of Skyrim's story. They belong to Cyrodiil, to white stone towers and forest cities that fell long before the Fourth Era began. Most players never think about them while walking through Skyrim's holds, but some of what they made did not stay in Cyrodiil. It moved through trade routes and tribute caravans, and the hands of people fleeing a civilization that was coming apart. Aelid-made objects traveled north. Some of them are still here. There is a Welkin stone fragment sitting on a shelf in the College of Winterhold's lower hall. It is not lit. Welkin stones, when intact and active, glow with a pale blue-white light. They were made by the Aelids of Cyrodiil and used to illuminate their cities and power their magical systems. This one is dark. It is a fragment, not a whole stone, and whatever charge it once held has long since faded. No college NPC has any dialogue about it. No quest involves it. It sits on that shelf, the way a curiosity sits in a collector's room. Present, identifiable to anyone who knows what they are looking at, and completely unexplained to anyone who does not. The Aelids built their civilization in Cyrodiil during the Merethic and early First Eras, long before the College of Winterhold existed. How this fragment reached Skyrim is not recorded anywhere. It may have passed through many hands before landing on that shelf. It has been dark for a very long time. The shelf around it collects dust. The stone does not. In a solitude manner, behind a locked display cabinet that most players pass without trying, there is a pale stone drinking vessel. The stone it is carved from is not native to Skyrim. It is a cream-white material with a very slight translucence. The kind of stone the Aelids worked with when making objects meant to be beautiful, rather than purely functional. Aelid craftsmen shaped this type of stone into cups, bowls, and vessels for ceremonial use. The carving on this one is subtle. Small, repeated geometric patterns around the rim, the kind of decorative language the Aelids used consistently across their work. No NPC in the Solitude Manor mentions it. No display label exists for it inside the cabinet. It sits behind the locked glass, the way an heirloom sits in a family home, long after anyone remembers where it came from. Someone in Solitude's past acquired this vessel, through purchase, through inheritance, through finding it in a ruin, and placed it behind glass. That is all that is known. The stone has not yellowed. It does not age the way wood and fabric age. It simply sits, pale and quiet, in a locked cabinet, in a city that has no idea what it is holding. The Aelids carved figures, small ones, mostly, people, animals, and shapes that do not match any creature found in the current world. A set of these figurines sits in a Markarth silversmith storage chest. They have no sale value assigned to them in the game's system. A merchant's storage chest normally holds items with prices attached. These have none. They are simply there, occupying space in a chest behind a silversmith's workshop, in a city built entirely from stone that predates the current population by thousands of years. The figurines themselves are carved from a pale material consistent with Aelid craft. The subjects are partially identifiable. One appears to be a standing figure in robes, one appears to be a four-legged animal of no specific species, and the others are abstract enough that no current scholar in Markarth has categorized them. How they reached Markarth is unclear. The Reach has its own ancient history, and objects moved through it across many eras. These figurines passed through enough hands that their origin was forgotten entirely. They ended up in a silversmith's storage, with no price and no explanation. Deep in Felglow Keep's sublevel, below the main dungeon that most players move through quickly, there is a white-veined stone tablet propped against a wall in a side room. The tablet itself is not Nordic. Nordic carved stones from early periods have a specific style, angular, runic, built around the sounds of their language. This tablet is different. The veining in the stone is a material characteristic associated with Aelid quarrying sites in central Cyrodiil. The markings on its face are not runic. They follow a carved line pattern used by Aelid record keepers for non-magical notation, the kind of marks used to record quantities, movements, and transactions rather than spells. This tablet predates any Nordic writing system found in Skyrim. Whatever it records has not been translated by any in-game source. It sits in Felglow Keep's lower level because someone brought it there. Felglow Keep has a long history of collecting unusual objects. This one was unusual enough to keep, but apparently not important enough to display. It leans against the wall in a side room that most players walk past entirely. The markings on its face are still perfectly clear. Behind a false wall panel in a Riften warehouse, one of those panels that blends into the surrounding stonework well enough that most players never press against it, there is a sealed Aeliad reliquary box. Reliquary boxes were made by the Aelids to hold objects of significance. They are recognizable by their construction, pale stone sides, a fitted lid with small carved clasps, and a locking mechanism built into the stone itself, rather than added as separate ironwork. This one opens. The mechanism still works, after what may be centuries. But when the lid comes up, the box is empty. Whatever it was made to hold is gone. The box itself remains in excellent condition. The stone has not cracked. The clasps move smoothly. The interior surface is clean. Someone placed it behind that false panel in a Riften warehouse. Whether they hid it because it was empty or because they intended to return and fill it is not recorded anywhere. The box waits in that hidden space the way a container waits, ready, open, and holding nothing. Near the docks in Dawnstar, in a storage chest that sits low and close to the water, there is a small disc. It is Aelid in origin. The material is the same pale stone used for Aelid's navigational and astronomical tools, and the markings carved into its surface match the star chart notation system the Aelids used when mapping the night sky. The Aelids paid close attention to stars. Their cities were often oriented around specific celestial positions. Their records of star movements were more detailed than most other civilizations of their time. This disk is a piece of that tradition, a portable reference tool, small enough to carry, used to identify star positions and track seasonal movement in the sky. It ended up in a Dawnstar dock chest. Dawnstar sits on the northern coast, and coastal towns accumulate objects from a very wide range of sources. Sailors carry things, traders pass through, objects move. This disk moved far enough north that it reached the coldest port in Skyrim and came to rest in a storage chest near the water. The stars it was made to track are still the same stars. The disk cannot tell anyone that anymore. It just sits in the chest, carved and precise, and very far from home. There is a length of silver chain in the game world, with a pendant attached. The pendant bears a symbol that no scholar in Skyrim identifies. No dialogue mentions it. No book in any library describes the design pressed into its face. The chain itself is silver, not a Skyrim silver alloy, but a refined silver of a purity that current Skyrim smithing does not consistently produce. The pendant symbol follows a design logic consistent with Aelid decorative language, not a letter, not a creature, but a geometric arrangement that the Aelids used to mark objects belonging to specific civic or religious categories. Which category this pendant belonged to is not recorded anywhere accessible in the game. It may have been a marker of ownership. It may have been a civic identifier worn by a specific class of official. It may have been purely decorative within a symbolic system that no current Tamrielic scholar has fully decoded. The chain is intact, The pendant hangs from it correctly. Someone wore this once, in Cyrodiil, during a time when the Aleid civilization was still standing, and that symbol meant something specific to anyone who saw it. Now it sits in Skyrim, unidentified, in a world that has forgotten the language it speaks. The Aleids are gone. Their cities in Cyrodiil are ruins. Their language is partly decoded and partly lost. Their people scattered and disappeared across the First Era, and the world they built was swallowed by time and by the empires that came after them. But their objects did not all disappear with them. Some traveled north, some passed through enough hands that all memory of their origin faded. They ended up on shelves and in chests and behind false walls in a province that never had any formal contact with the civilization that made them. They are still here, pale and quiet and precisely made, waiting in the patient way that well-crafted things wait, long after the hands that shaped them are gone. Potema the Wolf Queen died in her catacombs beneath Solitude. Most players who encounter her do so through a quest. They descend into the dark, they deal with what is down there, and they leave. They never look at what she left above ground, in the Blue Palace, in the steward's quarters, in wine cellars and attic chests, and servant trunks. Potema ruled Solitude for a long time. She accumulated things, and when she died, those things did not disappear. They were stored, forgotten, left exactly where they were. In the Third Era, Potema Septim ruled Solitude as its queen. She was not a quiet ruler. She was ambitious, politically sharp, and deeply connected to powerful networks across Tamriel. One of those networks ran east, into Morrowind, where trading houses operated with the kind of wealth and reach that matched Potema's own appetite for influence. In the Blue Palace's east storage room, there is a locked cedar chest. Cedar was used for correspondence storage because it resists moisture and insects. It was a practical choice for keeping letters intact over long periods. The chest carries a lock style consistent with Third Era noble household use. Inside, according to the game's item placement, are letters, personal correspondence between Potema and a Morrowind trading house. Not political dispatches, personal letters, the kind that discuss shipments of specific goods, personal requests, and the kind of frank language that does not appear in official records. No current Blue Palace NPC mentions the chest, no quest points to it. It sits in that east storage room the way private correspondence sits when the person who wrote it is long dead, and no one has thought to sort through it. The cedar has kept the contents in good condition. The lock has kept them private. The Solitude steward's quarters are not a place most players spend time. The steward handles administrative functions, not a character with much lore weight attached. But in the display case inside those quarters, there is a set of carved ivory hair combs. Ivory of this quality, worked this finely, carved with this level of detail, was not produced in Skyrim. It came from elsewhere, and it came at significant cost. The carving style on these combs is consistent with personal luxury items, commissioned by Third Era Solitude nobility. The design is not decorative in a generic sense. The pattern carved into each comb is specific, a repeating motif that appears in other Potema-associated objects across the game world. These were hers. They sat on a dressing table somewhere in the Blue Palace during her reign. After her death, they were moved, stored in the steward's quarters, placed in a display case, and gradually forgotten. The steward who currently occupies those quarters has no dialogue about them. They are simply there, in the case, carved with unusual care, belonging to a woman who has been dead for a very long time. Wine cellars in large noble households accumulate things. Bottles are placed, forgotten, placed over, forgotten again. In a back alcove of the Blue Palace's wine storage, there is a sealed bottle from Morrowind, not a current import. The wax seal on this bottle uses a stamp design from a Morrowind trading house that was active during the Third Era and has since dissolved or restructured under a different name. The wine inside is from Potema's era. It was placed in that alcove during her reign, possibly as part of a shipment connected to the same Morrowind trading network her correspondence references, and it was never opened. Sealed wine in a cool cellar can survive for a very long time. The bottle is intact. The wax seal has not cracked. Whatever is inside has been aging in that alcove for centuries, in the dark, behind other bottles that came and went while this one stayed. No current Blue Palace resident mentions it. No merchant in solitude would know what the stamp on the seal represents without outside knowledge. It sits in the back of a wine alcove, in the palace of a city that forgot the woman who put it there. In a Solitude Manor attic, one of those upper storage spaces that accumulates objects from every previous resident of the building, there is a chest. Inside the chest is a hand mirror. The frame is silver. Engraved into the silver, running around the oval of the frame, is a wolf motif. Not a decorative wolf in the generic Skyrim sense. A specific wolf, rendered in a style consistent with Potema's personal heraldic imagery. The Wolf Queen did not use that title casually. It appeared on her personal objects, in her correspondence, and in the visual language of her household. This mirror carries that same imagery on its frame. It is a personal object, not a political artifact, not a ceremonial piece. A mirror, something used privately, in quiet moments, by someone who wanted the objects around her to reflect who she was. It ended up in a manor attic in Solitude after her death. How it left the Blue Palace is not recorded. Objects move when estates are cleared. Things are boxed, distributed, stored, and eventually forgotten in attic chests. The silver has tarnished slightly at the edges. The wolf on the frame is still perfectly clear. In Potema's catacomb side chamber, not the main path players follow during her quest, but a side room that branches off the primary route, there is a candle holder on a stone shelf. The candle in it has burned down completely. What most players do not notice is that the candle holder is hollowed at its base. The bottom cavity is sealed with a small fitted piece of stone that blends into the holder's design. Inside that cavity is a journal, small, wax-sealed, written in a tight hand on pages that have stayed dry because the stone around them has kept the moisture out. The journal is personal, not political. Potema kept official records through her administrative staff. This is something else, written by her own hand, in a space she used privately, sealed inside a candle holder, in a room most players never fully explore. The wax on the journal's seal is the same color as the wax on the Blue Palace correspondence chest. The handwriting matches samples of her known written records. She placed it there herself. She sealed it herself, and she never came back for it. The candle above it burned down centuries ago. The journal underneath it has been in the dark ever since. In a locked wardrobe inside the Blue Palace, not in the public areas, but in a residential corridor most players pass through without stopping, there is a cloak. It is embroidered. The needlework is fine and deliberate, running along the hem and cuffs in a pattern that takes significant time and skill to produce. The cloak has no listed owner in the game's item system. It sits in that wardrobe with no name attached, no quest flag, no dialogue connected to it. But the embroidery pattern is specific. The color combination, a deep blue with silver thread, matches the personal color choices documented in Potema's court records. The construction of the cloak is consistent with Third-Era Solitude noble fashion, not current Fourth-Era styles. Someone made this cloak for someone specific. Someone wore it. Someone locked it in a wardrobe in the Blue Palace and either forgot it or chose not to return for it. The fabric has held its color well. Locked wardrobes in stone buildings keep out the light and the air. The cloak looks, in certain respects, like it could still be worn. It simply has no owner left to wear it. In a servant's storage trunk, the kind of plain, functional trunk that sits in the lower working areas of the Blue Palace, used by household staff to store cleaning supplies and spare linens, there is a set of cutlery, bone-handled. The bone used for the handles is carved and smoothed to a finish that standard servant quarters cutlery does not receive. This is not kitchen equipment. This is personal cutlery, the kind a specific person used at their own table and expected to be kept, cleaned, and stored carefully. The handles carry a small mark pressed into the bone near the base. It is not a maker's mark. It is a personal ownership mark, a small engraved detail that identified objects as belonging to a specific household member. The mark matches a detail found on other Patima-associated objects in the game world. Players who reach this trunk loot it without looking closely. The cutlery registers as a generic item in the inventory. Nothing flags it as significant. It goes into a pack with everything else and gets sold to a general merchant in the next town. Patima's personal cutlery, still marked with her household identifier, ends up in a general merchant's resale chest in Whiterun or Riften, completely unrecognized. Because nothing in the game ever told anyone what they were holding. Patima has been dead for a long time. Her catacomb quest resolves cleanly. Players leave Solitude and do not think about her again. But her things are still distributed across the city she ruled, in wine cellars and wardrobes and servant trunks and hollowed candle holders. In an attic chest in a manor whose current residents do not know who lived there before. In a display case in a steward's office where no one stopped to ask where those combs came from. In a cedar chest in an east storage room that no quest has ever opened. Patima ruled Solitude. She left her mark on it in the way that people leave marks on places, not always through monuments, but through the small things that stay behind when everything else moves on. The Blue Palace is still standing. Her things are still inside it, waiting, the way objects wait, without urgency, without end. The Reach is older than most of Skyrim's holds. Its people were here before the Nords came down from Atmora, before the Empire sent its roads north, before anyone drew a border around the land and gave it a name on a map. The people of the Reach had their own ways of doing things, their own ways of building, their own ways of working metal. Most players who enter the Reach see Forsworn camps and Markarth stone streets. They do not see what came before the Forsworn, the older tradition underneath. The Forge Masters who work the Reach's metal long before any resistance movement existed. Their tools and blades are still in the game world, sitting in chests and side rooms and back tunnels, quietly different from everything around them. In a Markarth back alley chest, one of those containers tucked into the narrow stone passages that run between the city's buildings, there is a curved, single-edge blade. The curve is not Nordic. Nordic blades favor straight lines and weight toward the tip. This blade curves from the base, with the edge on the inside of the curve, a design that serves a different cutting purpose than Nordic or imperial smithing traditions were built around. The handle material is what makes it unusual. It is not wood, not bone, not leather wrap over a metal tang. The handle is a dense, dark material that does not match any item category in the standard Skyrim crafting system. It is not identified by any merchant or NPC in Markarth. No dialogue describes it. The grip is smooth from use, shaped by hands over time into a form that fits a specific way of holding. Whoever made this blade made it for a purpose. Whoever used it regularly. It ended up in a back alley chest in the city, built on top of the civilization that produced it, with no label and no explanation. The edge is still clean. Whatever the handle material is, it has not degraded. It simply sits in that chest, different from everything around it, waiting for someone who knows what they are looking at. Druidark Redoubt is a Forsworn-held location west of Markarth. Most players move through it, focused on combat. In a storage chest in one of the Redoubt's interior rooms, there is a set of iron rivets. Not standard iron rivets. These are smaller than Nordic construction rivets, more precisely shaped and carved. Each rivet head carries a small mark, a pressed pattern that does not match any Nordic or imperial decorative system currently documented in the game. The carving is deliberate and consistent across all the rivets in the set. They were not marked randomly. The pattern repeats exactly, which means it meant something specific to the person who made them. Rivets like these were used in pre-Forsworn Reach construction, in armor, in furniture, in structural joins that needed both function and identification. The mark on the head told the person using them who made them, and possibly what they were rated for. This system of maker marking through carved rivet heads was a Reach Forgemaster tradition. It did not carry over into Nordic or imperial smithing practice. These rivets are the physical record of a marking system that has no surviving written documentation anywhere in the game world. They are the documentation. Sitting in a storage chest, in a forsworn redoubt, completely uncatalogued, near Carthwaston, the small silver mining settlement in the Reach, there is a stone-handled awl. It sits in a container close to the settlement, in the kind of location that suggests it belonged to someone working nearby. The awl itself is a leatherworking tool, used for piercing hide and stitching armor or clothing. The handle is carved stone, not a stone wrapped in leather or fitted with a stone pommel. The entire handle is one piece of carved rock, shaped to fit the hand, with a channel bored through it to seat the metal blade. The blade composition is not standard iron. It is harder than iron and carries a slight color difference, a faint grey-green tint that iron does not naturally produce. The Reach has mineral deposits that do not appear elsewhere in Skyrim. Reach Forgemasters worked with local materials that produced alloys and compositions outside the standard Nordic or Imperial toolkit. This awl's blade is one example. The handle is another. Stone-handled tools were practical in the Reach, where the right stone was often more available than good hardwood. The awl works. It is still functional. It is simply made from materials, and in a tradition that no current Skyrim craftsman practices or recognizes. In a chest inside Reachcliff Cave, there is a bronze alloy cup. It is not decorative. It is a working vessel, sized for drinking, shaped for handling, made to be used regularly. The bronze it is cast from carries smelting marks on its base. These marks, small lines pressed into the metal during the casting process, follow a pattern used by Reach Forgemasters to identify the alloy composition and the forge of origin. Nordic and Imperial bronze work does not use this marking system. The marks on this cup's base are not ornamental. They are informational, a record of what the cup is made from and where it came from, pressed into the metal at the moment of casting. The alloy itself is slightly different from standard bronze. The color is a fraction warmer, and the weight distribution suggests the tin-to-copper ratio was adjusted from the standard proportion. Reach smiths made these adjustments based on the specific ore sources available to them locally. The result is a cup that looks, at a glance, like any bronze vessel, but carries in its composition and its base marks the fingerprint of a specific regional tradition. No NPC in Reachcliff Cave or anywhere nearby identifies it. It sits in the chest among other items. Most players pocket it as vendor trash. It is not vendor trash. In a side room at Hag's End, the deep forsworn location at the top of a waterfall in the Reach, there is a small forging hammer. Most players who reach Hag's End are focused on the main path. The side room is easy to miss. The hammer inside it has a carved stone head, not iron, not Dwemer alloy, something that sits between those two categories in terms of hardness and workability. The stone used for the head is local to the Reach, a dense volcanic material found in specific outcroppings in the region that has properties useful for metalworking. Reach Forgemasters use stone-headed hammers for specific stages of the forging process, particularly for work that required precise impact without the rebound that iron hammers produce. The head of this hammer is carved, not just shaped. Small lines run along the striking face in a pattern that matches the functional marking system used on the Druidak redoubt rivets. Same tradition, same hand language pressed into metal and stone. The handle is old wood, still solid, because the side room at Hag's End stays dry. The stone head is still perfectly weighted. It is a working tool from a working tradition. It simply belongs to a tradition that has no current practitioners left in Skyrim. In the store chest at Dushnik Jarl, one of Skyrim's orc strongholds, located in the Reach, there is a length of chain armor links. Chain from this length was used in armor construction, not as a finished piece, but as raw material for a smith to work with. The weave pattern in this chain is not Nordic. Nordic chain armor uses a standard 4-in-1 ring pattern. 4 rings connected through a central ring, repeated across the surface. This chain uses a different pattern. The rings are smaller, the connections run at a different angle, and the overall weave produces a tighter surface with a different weight distribution. This weave pattern is specific to pre-Forsworn Reach armor tradition. It takes longer to produce than standard chain. It requires more precise ring sizing. It distributes impact differently across the surface. The Orc stronghold at Dushnik Yal sits inside the Reach's territory, and its store chest contains this length of Reach tradition chain alongside standard inventory. No explanation is given for how it got there. The Orcs and the Reach people have overlapping histories in the western reaches of Skyrim. This chain passed between those histories at some point and ended up in an Orc merchant chest with no documentation attached. In the back tunnel of Left-Hand Mine, the iron mine near Markarth, there is an unfinished blade blank. A blade blank is the raw form of a blade after initial shaping, but before grinding, finishing, and handle fitting. This one was set down in that back tunnel and never picked up again. The metal shows heat treatment marks. Specifically, it shows evidence of a differential hardening process, a technique where different parts of the blade are heated and cooled at different rates to produce a harder edge and a more flexible spine. This process produces better blades than standard Nordic smithing methods, which apply heat treatment uniformly. Current Skyrim smiths do not use differential hardening. No smith NPC in the game teaches it or references it. The technique is not part of the smithing skill system, but the evidence of it is pressed into this blade blank in the back tunnel of Left-Hand Mine, visible in the pattern of the metal's surface, in the color gradation where different heat treatments met. Someone in the Reach knew how to do this. They started this blade and did not finish it. The blank has been in that tunnel ever since, carrying in its unfinished surface the record of a method that died with the tradition that produced it. In an abandoned house in Markarth, one of the empty stone structures in the city's upper residential areas, there is a fire striker kit. A fire striker is a simple tool, a piece of flint and a steel striker, kept in a small case for making fire quickly and reliably. This kit is Reach-made. The steel striker is shaped differently from standard Nordic fire strikers. The striking edge is curved rather than straight, which produces sparks more consistently when used at a specific angle. The case is carved stone, fitted with a small lid, and the flint inside is the detail that separates this kit from anything produced locally. Flint of this specific type, a dark, fine-grained variety with a particular fracture quality, is not quarried anywhere near Skyrim. It comes from deposits much further south and west, in regions the Reach people had trade contact with long before Nordic or Imperial influence reached the area. Someone brought this flint north through old trade routes. A Reach forge master or toolmaker shaped it into striker flint and fitted it into a carved stone case with a curved steel. That kit ended up in an abandoned Markarth house, sitting in the quiet of a room no current resident uses, made from materials that traveled a long way to get there. The forge masters of the Reach did not leave records. They left objects, tools that do not match the system around them, blades made from materials no current smith identifies, chain woven in a pattern no current armorer teaches, flint carried from places no current map connects. The tradition they practiced did not survive into the Fourth Era in any documented form, but what they made survived. In chests and side rooms, and mine tunnels, and abandoned houses across the Western Hold. Quietly different, precisely made, built in a way that the world around them forgot, but the objects themselves did not. The Reach is very old. Its smiths were part of that age. What they left behind is still here, sitting in the stone city, built on top of everything they knew. Most players who think about Dunmer in Skyrim think about the Grey Quarter in Windhelm, the refugees, the tension, the Fourth Era problems that came after Red Mountain erupted and pushed thousands of Dark Elves out of Morrowind. But Dunmer were in Skyrim long before that. Individual traders, travelers, people who moved through the holds quietly, buying and selling, passing through on longer journeys. They came and went across many centuries, and like anyone who moves through a place, they left things behind. Not in the Grey Quarter, in dockworker chests and pawn shop back rooms, and warehouse shelves, in cities that had no Dunmer population to speak of. The objects are still there. They simply have no one left to explain them. In a Windhelm dockworker's chest, not in the Grey Quarter, but down near the working docks where cargo moves, and laborers store their personal items. There is an ash-wrapped bundle of incense sticks. The wrapping is the first detail that identifies them. Dunmer incense is traditionally bundled in a specific way. The sticks grouped and wrapped in a spiral of ash-treated cloth that keeps the incense dry and preserves the resin compounds that produce the scent. This bundling method is not used anywhere in Skyrim's current culture. The incense itself is made from plant resins, not native to Skyrim. These plants grow in Morrowind's ashlands, in conditions that do not exist anywhere in the northern province. The bundle predates the refugee wave. The ash cloth wrapping has aged in a way consistent with decades of storage, rather than recent arrival. Someone carried this bundle into Windhelm long before Red Mountain changed everything. A Dunmer trader passing through the docks, leaving behind something small and personal that ended up in a dock worker's chest through the ordinary confusion of shared working spaces. No Windhelm NPC mentions it. No quest connects to it. It sits in that chest, still faintly scented, from a time before the Grey Quarter existed. The Riften pawn shop handles goods from everywhere. Things pass through it without much documentation. In a backroom storage area, not the main trading floor, there is a set of prayer beads carved from volcanic glass. Volcanic glass of this specific type comes from Morrowind. It is a byproduct of the ashland environment around Red Mountain, formed in conditions that do not exist in Skyrim's geology. Dunmer prayer beads made from this material were personal devotional objects, carried privately, used in quiet moments of reflection, connected to ancestor veneration. The beads are carved, not just shaped. Small marks run along the surface of each one, not decorative, but meaningful within Dunmer devotional practice. The string connecting them is ash-treated fiber, the same material used in the Windhelm incense wrapping. It is old. The fiber has darkened and stiffened with age. These beads moved through many hands before reaching a Riften pawn shop backroom. Someone sold them. Someone bought them. Someone stored them and forgot them. They have been in that back room long enough that no current Riften resident knows what they are. A pawn shop worker who did not recognize them simply put them in storage and moved on. They are still there, in a solitude storage warehouse, one of the large receiving buildings near the city's main gate, where imported goods are held before distribution. There is a sealed Dunmer spirit bottle. Spirit bottles were a specific container type used in Morrowind for transporting distilled ash wine. The bottle itself is dark glass, thick-walled, with a wax seal over a fitted stone stopper. Ash wine is a Morrowind specialty, produced from plants that grow in volcanic soil, distilled through a process that concentrates both the flavor and the preservation properties of the liquid. It travels well in the right container. This one traveled well enough to reach solitude and end up in a warehouse storage shelf. The wax seal is intact. The stone stopper has not shifted. Whatever is inside has been sealed for long enough that the bottle has gathered dust on 3 sides and sat undisturbed long enough to leave a faint ring on the shelf surface beneath it. No Solitude merchant has this bottle in their active inventory. No NPC in the warehouse mentions it. It sits on that shelf in the way that imported goods sit when the importer never comes to collect them. Present, sealed, and slowly forgotten by the people working around it every day. In a Whiterun merchant's strongbox, the kind of locked personal storage a trader uses for documents and high-value small items, there is a folded road map. The map is Dunmer made. The material it is drawn on is a treated skin used in Morrowind for documents meant to last. Tougher than standard paper, resistant to moisture, able to hold ink without fading for a very long time. The map itself shows northern Morrowind in detail. Roads, settlements, waypoints, distances marked in Dunmeri script. What makes it unusual is the political geography it shows. The borders on this map, the names of the settlements, the administrative divisions it reflects. None of these match the current political reality of Morrowind in the Fourth Era. This map predates significant political changes in the region. It was drawn during a period when certain settlements still existed that have since been destroyed or abandoned, and when certain borders ran differently than they do now. A Dunmer trader carried this map through Skyrim on a journey that took them through Whiterun. The map ended up in a merchant's strongbox, possibly traded, possibly left as payment, possibly simply misplaced and never reclaimed. The merchant who currently owns that strongbox does not read Dunmerry script and has no way to know what the map shows. In a Dawnstar storage trunk, one of the plain working trunks in the town's general storage areas, there is a carved stone idol, small enough to hold in one hand. The figure it depicts is a standing form with specific posture and hand positioning that matches the iconographic tradition used in Dunmer ancestor worship. Ancestor spirits in Dunmer religious practice are represented through specific physical conventions, particular positions of the hands, particular angles of the head, particular details in the facial carving that identify the spirit's category within the ancestor cult hierarchy. This idol follows those conventions precisely. It is not a generic figure. It is a specific type of devotional object made for private use, the kind a Dunmer traveler would carry personally rather than leave in a temple. It ended up in a Dawnstar storage trunk. Dawnstar is a cold port town on Skyrim's northern coast. Dunmer traders who moved goods along the northern sea routes passed through it. One of them left this idol behind, possibly by accident, possibly because the trunk was a shared space and objects got mixed together. No Dawnstar NPC has any dialogue about it. It sits in the trunk among rope and tools and general storage items, a carefully carved devotional object far from the religious tradition that gave it meaning. In a Markarth seamstress's locked chest, kept in the working area of a clothing and textile business in the Stone City, there is a needle kit. The kit is Dunmer made. The needles themselves are the identifying detail. They are formed from a bone material specific to Morrowind, a dense, fine-grained bone sourced from creatures in the Ashland regions. This bone produces needles with a specific quality. They are harder than standard bone needles. They hold a point longer, and they do not flex under tension the way standard needles do. Dunmer tailors and craftspeople who worked with ash cloth, the treated fabric used in Morrowind for garments designed to resist the ashfall environment, required needles with exactly these properties. Standard Nordic bone needles are too soft for ash cloth work. The kit also contains thread, ash-treated fiber of the same type used in the Windhelm incense wrapping and the Riften prayer bead string. The Markarth seamstress who owns this chest did not make these needles. She acquired them at some point, possibly from a traveling Dunmer trader who passed through the Reach and locked them in her working chest because they were better than what she could source locally. She may not know exactly what she has. She knows the needles are good. That is enough for a working craftsperson. In the cellar of a Falkreath general store, below the main trading floor, in the lower storage where supplies are kept before being brought up for sale, there is a sealed tin, small, flat, fitted with a lid that presses down and seals against a soft inner ring. Inside is a ground spice. The color visible through the seam of the lid is a dark reddish brown. The faint smell that escapes from the same seam is not identifiable by any current Falkreath merchant or NPC. No seller anywhere in Skyrim carries this spice in their active inventory. No recipe in the game calls for it. It is a Dunmer culinary spice, used in Morrowind cooking traditions, particularly in the preparation of certain preserved foods that travel well on long journeys. A Dunmer trader passing through Falkreath carried this tin as part of their personal supplies. It ended up in the general store cellar through the ordinary movement of goods in a trading settlement, possibly left in partial payment, possibly stored temporarily and forgotten. The tin's seal has held. The spice inside is still dry. It has been sitting in a Falkreath cellar long enough that the merchant above it has no memory of where it came from. It simply appeared in the inventory at some point, and no one came to claim it. Dunmer traders moved through Skyrim across many centuries. They did not come in waves. They came one at a time or in small groups, following trade routes that connected Morrowind to the holds of Skyrim through mountain passes and coastal ports. They carried things with them, practical things, personal things, things made in a tradition that Skyrim's population did not share and largely did not recognize. When those traders left, or when they died on the road, or when they simply moved on and left things behind by accident, those objects stayed. In dockworker chests and pawnshop back rooms and seamstresses' locked drawers and general store cellars. Quiet and specific and made in a way that is different from everything around them. The Grey Quarter in Windhelm is where most players think the Dunmer story begins in Skyrim. It does not. It begins much earlier than that, in small objects left in quiet places, by people who passed through and kept moving. Hammerfell is west of Skyrim, separated by distance and mountain ranges, and a long history of going its own way. Most players think of Redguards as a race that exists in Skyrim's background, a few NPCs in cities, a quest involving Alik'r warriors looking for someone in Whiterun. That is most of what the game shows, but Redguards have been coming to Skyrim for a very long time. Warriors traveling north to test themselves, traders following routes that connected Hammerfell to the eastern provinces, scholars moving through on longer journeys, sailors stopping at northern ports. They came through Skyrim's holds, and they left things behind. A knife in a lost and found chest, a document case in a harbour warehouse, a hand drum in a music hall storage room, small evidence of people who passed through and kept moving. In the lost and found chest at a Whiterun inn, the kind of container innkeepers keep for items left behind by guests who never returned for them, there is a curved knife. The blade curves gently from base to tip, in a style specific to the Alik'r warrior tradition of Hammerfell. Alik'r warriors carried personal blades as a matter of both function and identity. The curve on this style of knife is not decorative. It serves a specific cutting purpose, suited to the fighting techniques practiced in the Alik'r desert. Techniques developed over centuries for combat in open terrain against opponents who wore different armor than Skyrim's enemies. The grip is the detail that confirms its origin. The handle material is wrapped in a specific pattern, a diagonal cross wrap using a cord type made from desert plant fiber, not found in Skyrim. The wrap is tight and even. It was done by someone who knew the technique and had done it many times. This knife belonged to an Alik'r warrior who stayed at that Whiterun inn. They left without it. Whether they forgot it, lost it in the room, or left in circumstances that did not allow them to return, is not recorded. The innkeeper placed it in the lost and found. No one came back for it. It is still there, in that chest, next to miscellaneous items left by travelers who also did not return. In a Solitude Harbour warehouse, one of the large storage buildings where imported goods wait before distribution into the city, there is a sealed document case. The leather it is made from is immediately distinct. Hammerfell produces a red-toned leather through a tanning process that uses local plant compounds not available in Skyrim. The result is a leather with a warm, reddish-brown color and a particular surface texture, slightly smoother than Nord-tanned hide, more resistant to moisture, with a faint smell that persists long after the tanning process is complete. This case is that leather. The seams are stitched in a Hammerfell style, a double lock stitch that prevents unraveling even when one thread breaks. The case is sealed with a brass clasp fitted with a small personal lock. No key for this lock exists in any nearby NPC inventory. Whatever documents it contains are still inside, sealed in red leather, in a Solitude Harbour warehouse where goods from many places pass through and occasionally stay longer than intended. The case may have arrived with a trader who moved on without collecting it. It may have been left as security for a transaction that was never completed. The warehouse has no record of it. It simply sits on a shelf, sealed and patient, smelling faintly of a tanning process from very far away. In a Markarth pawnshop back room, the storage area behind the main trading counter, where items of uncertain value are kept until a buyer appears, there is a travel compass. The compass itself is functional. The needle is properly balanced and points north correctly, but the markings around the compass face are not in Tamrielic. They are in Yoku, the old language of the Redguard people, predating their arrival in Hammerfell and carried forward in certain traditional objects and religious contexts. Yoku script on a compass face was not unusual for Redguard travelers of a specific tradition. Certain warrior and scholar orders in Hammerfell maintained the use of Yoku on personal instruments as a matter of cultural practice, a way of keeping the old language present in daily life. This compass was made for someone from that tradition. It travelled with them into Skyrim, through the Reach, and ended up in a Markarth pawnshop when its owner either sold it, traded it, or could not be found to reclaim it. The pawnshop owner cannot read Yoku. The compass was assessed for its metal value and its functional accuracy. It was placed in the back room at a price no buyer has yet matched. The markings on its face mean nothing to anyone currently in Markarth. They meant something specific to the person who carried it north. Near the Ivarstead Inn, in a storage chest, close to the building that holds supplies for the small settlement at the base of the throat of the world, there is a length of cloth. It is folded carefully. The fold is not random. The cloth has been folded in a specific pattern that preserves a central section from contact with the surfaces around it, the section that would rest against the hands during use. This is a prayer cloth. In Hammerfell, certain devotional practices involve a cloth held or laid out during prayer, kept clean, folded in a specific way between uses, treated as a personal sacred object rather than a communal one. The weave of this cloth is Hammerfell in origin. The thread is a cotton variety grown in Hammerfell's coastal regions. The colour, a faded but still recognizable deep blue with a narrow border pattern in a lighter thread, matches a devotional colour tradition associated with Redguard reverence for Tuwaka, the god of souls and the afterlife. A Redguard traveller carried this cloth to Ivarstead. Perhaps they were walking to High Hrothgar. Perhaps they were simply passing through on a longer journey. They left the cloth behind in a storage chest near the inn. It has been folded in that careful way ever since, preserved by its own wrapping, waiting for hands that are not coming back. In a lockbox pulled from a Riften canal, one of the submerged containers that sit in the waterways below the city, there is a set of bronze coins. These coins are not septims. They are not any currency currently circulating in Skyrim or the broader empire. They are Hammerfell bronze, a regional currency used in parts of Hammerfell for smaller transactions, particularly in the interior trading towns away from the coastal markets that dealt in imperial gold. The coins are stamped with imagery specific to Hammerfell's internal currency tradition, a design that references neither the Empire nor any current Tamrielic authority. They have real bronze value, but no current Riften merchant would know what to do with them. They fell into the Riften Canal at some point, lost from a pocket, dropped during a struggle, or thrown in deliberately for reasons not recorded. A Redguard trader or traveller passing through Riften carried these coins as part of their own money. The canal took them. The lockbox preserved them from the silt. They are still there in the metal box, at the bottom of the waterway, stamped with images from a currency system that no one in Riften uses or recognizes. In the storage room of a Solitude music hall, behind the main performance space, in the area where instruments are kept between uses, there is a small hand drum. The drum is Hammerfell in construction. The frame is a type of lightweight wood not sourced from Skyrim's forests. The skin, stretched across the face, is treated in a specific way, scraped to a particular thinness, and then dried under tension. That produces a sound quality different from Nord drum construction. In Hammerfell, this style of drum was used in ceremonial contexts, not entertainment, ceremony. Specific rhythms played on drums like this marked transitions, the beginning and end of significant events, the movement between phases of a ritual, the acknowledgement of something important passing or arriving. A Redguard traveller carried this drum into Solitude. It ended up in a music hall storage room, placed among Nord instruments, by someone who recognized it as a drum, without knowing what kind of drum it was. The Solitude bards have not played it. The skin is still properly tensioned. The frame has not warped in the storage room's conditions. It sits among lyres and lutes, quiet and unplayed, waiting for someone who knows the rhythms it was made to carry. In a crate in Dawnstar's harbour, one of the wooden cargo containers that sit on the docks between unloading and distribution, there is a log, a sailor's log, written by hand, in 2 languages. The main text runs in Tamrielic, the common tongue, recording dates, weather conditions, distances travelled, cargo notes, and port observations in the straightforward style of a working sailor's record. But certain passages are written in Yoku, the same old Redguard language that appears on the Markarth compass. These Yoku passages are not cargo notes. They are personal. They record thoughts, observations, and reflections that the writer chose to keep in their first language, the language that felt more private, more accurate for what they were trying to say. The log covers a journey that passed through several northern ports, including Dawnstar. The final entry is dated. After that date, no more entries follow. The crate the log sits in has no assigned owner in the game's system. The ship it arrived on is not identified. A Redguard sailor came to Dawnstar and did not take their log when they left, or could not. What happened after the final entry is not written anywhere. The log sits in the harbor crate with its last page open, in 2 languages, the last few lines in Yoku. Redguards moved through Skyrim across a very long stretch of time, not in armies, not in migrations, one at a time, or in small groups. Traders and warriors and sailors and scholars who had reasons of their own to come north. They passed through Whiterun and Solitude and Markarth and Riften and Ivarstead and Dawnstar. They left a knife in a lost and found, a compass in a pawn shop, a prayer cloth in a storage chest near a mountain path, a drum in a music hall that does not know what it is holding. Most of them are not remembered. Their names are not in any book in Skyrim's libraries. Their journeys are not recorded in any history, but their objects are still here, in canals and crates and back rooms and locked cases, small and specific, and made in a tradition that Skyrim never fully understood and mostly forgot. They passed through. The things they carried stayed. The Daedric princes do not need shrines to leave things behind. They do not need quests or priests or willing participants. Some of them simply place objects in the world and walk away, or whatever it is that beings outside of time do instead of walking away. These objects carry no explanation. No NPC points to them. No dialogue acknowledges them. They simply exist in places they have no logical reason to be, made from materials that do not belong to the world around them, doing things that the game's systems cannot fully account for. 7 of those objects are described here. None of them have a quest. None of them have a shrine. None of them were asked for by anyone. Apocrypha is Hermaeus Mora's realm, a place of endless black shelves and ink-dark seas, where knowledge is stored and guarded and slowly consumed by the act of being known. Players who enter it during the Dragonborn questline move through its reading halls with a purpose. They are looking for something specific. Most of them do not stop to examine the shelves carefully. On a reading hall surface, in one of Apocrypha's accessible chambers, there is a sealed obsidian box. The seal on it is not wax. It is the box itself. The lid fits into the body so precisely that no seam is visible from the outside. The surface is perfectly smooth and perfectly black. Inside the box, accessible if the seal is broken by specific means, is a note. The note is written in no language currently documented in any Elder Scrolls source. Not Dunmerry, not Aldmerry, not Dwemerys, not Dragon language. The characters do not match any writing system in the game's book collection or loading screen text. Hermaeus Mora collects knowledge from every corner of existence, including corners that have no name in any current language. The note may be from one of those corners. What it says is not translatable by any in-game means. It has been sitting sealed in that obsidian box, in a realm made entirely of recorded knowledge, unread, which may be the strangest thing about it. Raven Rock on Solstheim has its abandoned sections, buildings that were emptied and left when the town's fortunes changed. In one of those abandoned houses, a structure with no current occupant and no quest attached, there is a glass jar. The jar contains sand, not ash, which would be ordinary on Solstheim. Sand. The sand inside shifts color as the hours pass in the game world. At certain times it is pale, almost white. At others it deepens toward orange, then red, then a dark amber, before cycling back. No alchemy tag is attached to the sand. No item description explains the color change. No NPC in Raven Rock acknowledges the jar. Peritite governs pestilence and natural order, the slow cycling of things through their proper stages. Some fans connect this jar to his domain, pointing to the way the color shifts follow a regular, unbroken cycle, regardless of what happens around it. Others suggest it belongs to a prince whose influence in Solstheim is never directly addressed in the Dragonborn questline. The jar has been sitting in that abandoned house, cycling through its colors, since before any current Raven Rock resident moved in. It will keep cycling long after. Falkreath's hold is heavy, with old trees and quiet graves. Things end up in Falkreath that do not belong anywhere obvious. In a chest in the Falkreath area, not in the town itself, but in the surrounding woodland, there is a feather, black, oily in appearance, and large, significantly larger than any feather produced by any bird currently present in Skyrim's fauna. No creature in the game's bestiary produces a feather this size. The item sits in a standard chest container with no quest flag and no special label beyond its basic description, which notes its size without explaining it. Nocturnal is associated with ravens and darkness, and things that move at the edge of perception. Some players connect this feather to her on the basis of its color and its presence in a hold known for death and endings. Others point out that feathers of unusual size appear in folklore traditions across Tamriel as markers of divine or Daedric attention, left where a prince passed close to the mortal world without fully entering it. Whatever left this feather in a Falkreath chest did not leave any other trace, just the feather, black and impossible, and sitting in the dark. The Arcanium in the College of Winterhold is a library. Its librarian, Urag Groshub, knows his collection precisely. He knows what is on which shelf, and what is missing, and what has been damaged. He does not know about the small stone figure on a high shelf near the back of the room. It is not in his catalogue. No college NPC acknowledges it in dialogue. The figure itself is carved from a grey-white stone and depicts a standing form with proportions and details that do not match any of the 16 Daedric princes, as they are represented in standard Tamrielic iconography. The posture is different, the details on the face are different. Either it represents a prince in an aspect not commonly depicted, or it represents something else entirely. A Daedric entity that does not appear in the standard 16. Daedric cosmology, in Elder Scrolls lore, is not a closed system. The 16 princes are the ones mortals know about. Whether they are the only ones is a question the lore does not fully answer. This figure sits on a high shelf in the most comprehensive magical library in Skyrim, unidentified, in a building full of people whose entire purpose is identifying things. Nenchuanzel is the Dwemer ruin beneath Markarth. Most players who enter it do so for a specific quest and follow a relatively direct path through its main chambers. The unmapped lower level, a section that branches off the main route and requires deliberate exploration to reach, contains a sealed pressure vessel. Dwemer pressure vessels were used to contain materials under controlled conditions. Temperature, pressure, and atmospheric composition could all be maintained within them. This one holds a vial. The vial contains a liquid that glows faintly blue in darkness. No alchemy effect is tagged to this liquid in the game's system. No item name identifies what it is. The blue glow is not consistent with any standard Dwemer material or any standard magical reagent in the game. Some fans have noted that the glow pattern, a slow pulse rather than a steady light, matches descriptions in obscure Daedric texts of substances used as offerings to princes whose domains include transformation or the boundary between states. How a Daedric substance ended up sealed inside a Dwemer pressure vessel in an unmapped section of a ruin beneath Markarth is not explained anywhere. The vessel kept it perfectly preserved. Whatever it is, it has been glowing slowly in the dark down there for a very long time. Molag Bal's shrine in Skyrim is associated with a specific quest. Players who complete that quest move through the shrine area with a clear objective. They interact with the objects the quest requires and leave. On the edge of the shrine area, not in the quest path, but in the surrounding space, there is a piece of cloth. The item description notes one thing about it. It is warm. Not enchanted for warmth in the standard sense. No frost resistance effect. No heat enchantment. Simply warm to the touch, as described in its item text, with no mechanical explanation attached to that warmth. Molag Bal's domain is Cold Harbor, a realm of cold and domination and the crushing of will. Something warm, sitting at the edge of his shrine, is either an anomaly or a deliberate contrast. Some fans interpret it as belonging to a different prince entirely, one whose presence intersects with Molag Bal's territory in ways the questline does not address. Others think the warmth is a remnant of something that was alive before it became cloth. The item sits at the edge of the shrine area, with no quest flag, no dialogue, and one small detail in its description that does not match anything around it. Hagraven nests accumulate strange things. Hagravens collect objects with purpose, for rituals, for trade with other practitioners, for reasons that do not always follow a logic outsiders can follow. In a Hagraven nest, there is a smooth black stone, perfectly smooth, naturally black, with a hole through its center, a hole that is too perfectly circular and too precisely centered to have been made by anything other than deliberate, skilled work. The stone has an enchantment tag in the game's system, but the enchantment has no listed effect. The tag exists. The effect field is empty. Something was put into this stone and either was never completed, was removed at some point, or operates in a way the game's enchantment system does not display to the player. Black stones with holes through their centers appear in folk traditions across Tamriel as objects used to see things that are not normally visible, held up to the eye, used as a focusing point for perception outside the normal range. Which prince left this stone in a Hagraven nest is not identified anywhere. The Hagraven had it. Before the Hagraven, someone or something else did. The hole through the center is as clean as the day it was made. The enchantment tag remains. The effect field stays empty. The Daedric princes do not explain themselves. They place things in the world, and those things stay. In reading halls and abandoned houses, and Falkreath chests, and library shelves, and Dwemer pressure vessels, and Hagraven nests. Without labels, without quests, without anyone to ask about them. They were left by powers that do not operate on mortal schedules or follow mortal logic. The objects simply remain, quiet and specific, and slightly wrong in ways that are hard to name. In a world full of things that have explanations, these do not. They simply sit where they were placed, doing what they do, in a game world that has mostly moved on without ever accounting for them. Orc strongholds are not open places. They have walls for a reason. The people inside them do not welcome strangers, and strangers who force their way in do not find much welcome either. Most players who encounter Skyrim's strongholds do so briefly, fighting their way through or completing a single transaction and leaving. The ones who earn entry through the proper channels, who sit inside those walls long enough to look around carefully, find a world that operates entirely on its own terms, its own tools, its own ceremonies, its own ways of making things that the world outside the walls never learned and never asked about. 7 objects made inside Skyrim's orc strongholds are described here. None of them appear anywhere else in the game. None of them were made for anyone outside. Mammoth bone is not a standard smithing material in Skyrim. The game's crafting system does not include it. Nordic smiths use iron and steel and leather. Dwemer smiths used metal alloys the current age cannot replicate. Orc smiths work within the standard system for the most part, but not entirely. In Largashbur's forge storage, there is a hunting knife with a blade made from mammoth bone, not a bone handle over a metal blade. The blade itself is bone, shaped, hardened through a process not documented in any in-game smithing text, and edged to a sharpness that exceeds standard iron blades in the game's item comparison. The hardening process used on this blade produces a result that the standard smithing skill tree does not account for. Orc hunting tradition in the strongholds developed techniques outside the system that the rest of Skyrim uses, because the strongholds developed outside the rest of Skyrim. This knife was made for hunting, not for ceremony, for actual use in the field, where its maker trusted bone over iron for reasons the blade's edge confirms. No equivalent exists anywhere else in the game world. The forge storage is not a place most visiting players look carefully. The knife sits there, sharper than it has any reason to be. Orcish lore is built around trials, disputes between stronghold members, challenges for leadership, questions of honor and obligation. These are settled through formal processes that involve the whole community. In Narzulbur's longhouse chest, there is a set of carved stone weights. These weights are used in trial ceremonies, physical objects placed on a stone surface to represent the weight of evidence, obligation, and claim during formal proceedings. Each weight is carved with markings that identify its category, what kind of claim it represents, how much formal standing it carries in the proceeding. The carving is precise. These weights were made to be accurate, both physically and symbolically. Narzulbur's current population uses them. They are not historical artifacts. They are functional objects in an active legal tradition. Most players who enter Narzulbur are focused on the ebony mine or the quest that brings them there. The longhouse chest is easy to pass. The weights inside it represent a legal system that has no written code anywhere in the game. It exists entirely in practice, in memory, and in the physical objects used to conduct it. Mor Khazgur sits in the far northwest of Skyrim, near the border with High Rock. It is the most remote of the Reach area strongholds, difficult to reach and easy to ignore. In the chief's quarters, there is a hand-drawn map. The map shows Orc clan territory across Skyrim, not the holds as defined by Nord and Imperial administration, but the territory as understood by the strongholds themselves. The boundaries on this map do not follow hold lines. They follow landscape features, seasonal hunting ranges, resource access points, and the historical movement of clan groups across the province. The map is accurate to the game world's geography. Every stronghold is correctly placed. Every boundary reflects real spatial relationships between the clans. But this map exists nowhere else in the game. No book in any library describes Orc territorial organization in Skyrim this way. No NPC outside the strongholds references this understanding of the land. The chief of Mor Khazgur drew this, or had it drawn. It represents a complete, functional understanding of how Skyrim is organized from inside the walls, a geography that exists in parallel to the one on every Imperial roadmap, drawn by people who have been in Skyrim longer than most of the holds they are not recognized by. Orc healers in the strongholds work with what is available inside the walls and in the surrounding land. They do not rely on standard alchemy merchants or college-trained potion theory. In Dushnik Jarl's healer room, a dedicated space that most visiting players walk past, there is a sealed leather medicine kit. The kit contains plant material, dried samples of plants that do not appear in the standard alchemy ingredient system. These plants grow near the strongholds, in the specific soil and elevation conditions of their locations, and were identified and cultivated by Orc healers over generations of observation. They are not in the game's alchemy tables, because they are not available to the player through any normal means. The medicine kit is the only place they appear. The healer who assembled this kit knows what each plant does, how to prepare it, what it treats, what it should not be combined with. That knowledge lives in the healer. The kit is the physical record of a medical tradition developed entirely outside the institutions that the rest of Skyrim treats as authoritative on the subject of healing. In Larg Ashbur's locked armory chest, the storage space where the stronghold keeps its most valuable equipment, there is a length of chain. The metal it is made from is black, not darkened iron, not Dwemer alloy, a black metal that does not appear in the smithing system under any category. The links are formed differently from standard chain construction, smaller contact points, a specific angle of connection that distributes tension differently across the length. Chain made this way behaves differently under load. It does not stretch the same way. It does not fail the same way. The Orc smithing tradition that produced this chain developed the alloy from local ore sources in the Reach, through a smelting process not documented anywhere in the game's crafting texts. The strongholds have kept certain metallurgical knowledge inside their walls by necessity. They could not always trade for materials, and could not always trust outside sources. This chain is one result of that necessity. It sits in a locked chest in an armory that most players never open, made from a metal the game's crafting system does not name. In a corner of a Narzulba building, not the forge, not the longhouse, but one of the secondary structures inside the stronghold, there is a staff. It stands upright, leaned against the wall, made from a single piece of dark wood. The wood is not identified by any item name. It does not match any tree species visible in Skyrim's environment. The staff is tall, taller than a standard walking staff, proportioned for someone larger than the average human NPC. It has no enchantment tag, no quest flag, no item name in the game's system. It is simply there, standing in the corner, belonging to an elder who may or may not still be alive, depending on where the player is in the game's timeline. Orc elders, in the strongholds, carry ceremonial objects that mark their status and their accumulated authority. This staff is one of those objects. Its wood came from somewhere specific, a source the stronghold knows, and the outside world does not. The fact that it has no name in the item system does not mean it has no name. It means the game never recorded the one it has. Mor Khazgor's storage area holds supplies for the stronghold's daily operation. In among the practical supplies, food stores, tool materials, preserved goods, there is a pressed piece of bark, flat, dry, carefully preserved between two heavier surfaces to keep it from curling. Carved into the bark are Orcish runes. This is not the standard Orcish written language, as it appears in in-game books. The rune shapes are different. The arrangement follows a pattern that does not match any alphabet documented in Skyrim's library system. Some fans have suggested this represents an older form of written Orcish, a script that predates the current written form and was maintained within certain strongholds as a matter of cultural continuity. Others have noted that the arrangement of the runes does not follow left to right or right to left reading patterns, but appears to spiral inward from the edges, a format that suggests the content is not linear text, but something else, a record, a diagram, a set of instructions for something that requires a different kind of reading. The bark has been kept flat and dry for long enough that the carving is still perfectly clear. Whatever it says, someone in Mor Khazgor considered it worth preserving carefully. The storage room holds it the same way it holds the food and the tools, as something necessary, something that should not be lost. Orc strongholds have been in Skyrim for a very long time. They built their walls before most of the current holds had their borders. They developed their tools and their lore and their medicine and their metallurgy inside those walls, away from the systems that the rest of Skyrim treated as standard. The objects they made reflect that. A bone blade sharper than iron, a map that shows a different Skyrim than the Imperial one, a black metal chain the smithing system has no name for, a piece of bark with runes that do not match any documented alphabet. These things were made by people who did not need outside approval for what they knew or how they knew it. They simply made what they needed and kept it inside the walls. Most of it is still there. Alchemy in Skyrim runs on a system. Ingredients have effects. Effects combine. Players learn the system and move through it efficiently. Most of the time, an ingredient is simply available, found in the wild, bought from a merchant, picked up in a dungeon. But some ingredients do not follow the system's normal rules. Some appear only once, in a single container, in a location most players never reach. Some have properties the standard ingredient table does not list. Some are sitting in sealed containers, in unmapped rooms beneath ruins, that most players pass through without stopping. 7 of those ingredients are described here. None of them respawn. Most of them have never been picked up at all. Void salts come from storm atronachs. Players who fight enough of them accumulate void salts through normal gameplay. They are not a rare ingredient in the standard sense, but the void salts found inside a sealed Dwemer pressure vessel in Nin Chuanzel's unmapped lower level are different in one specific way. They were never dropped by a creature. They were stored, placed deliberately inside a sealed vessel in a Dwemer facility, which means the Dwemer had void salts and considered them worth preserving under controlled conditions. Dwemer research into Atronach composition was extensive. They studied the materials that Daedric entities were made from, with the same methodical approach they applied to everything else. A sealed sample of void salts in a pressure vessel, in an unmapped section of their facility, is consistent with that research tradition. The vessel kept the sample stable. The unmapped lower level of Nushuan Zel is accessible, but requires deliberate exploration beyond the quest path. Most players never reach it. The void salts inside the vessel have been sitting in controlled conditions in the dark, beneath Markarth, since the Dwemer last walked through that room. They are still in perfect condition, which was presumably the point. Giant's toes are a well-known alchemy ingredient. Players collect them. Merchants sell them. They are useful and fairly available. The giant's toe found in a chest in Sleeping Tree Camp's back cave is not a standard one. It is double the weight of any other giant's toe in the game. Not slightly heavier, double. The weight tag on this specific item is different from every other instance of the same ingredient. Sleeping Tree Camp is notable for its strange tree and the sap it produces. A sap with unusual properties that connect the location to something outside the normal ecology of Skyrim. The giant who lived near this tree was larger than standard giant NPCs, according to some fans who have measured the geometry. Whether the oversized toe is connected to that specific giant, to the tree, or to whatever influenced the tree's growth, is not explained anywhere. The chest in the back cave is easy to miss. Players who enter Sleeping Tree Camp for the sap often do not explore the back section at all. The toe sits in the chest, heavier than it should be, in a location that is already strange, for reasons the game never fully explains. The Forgotten Vale is a hidden valley, accessible through the Dawnguard questline. Its ecology is isolated. Plants and creatures that exist nowhere else in Skyrim grow there, protected by the valley's geography and its long separation from the outside world. Among the plant life in the Forgotten Vale, there is a dried sample of a species that does not appear on the standard alchemy ingredient table. The sample can be picked up. It enters the inventory as an alchemy ingredient, but when the player attempts to discover its effects through standard alchemy experimentation, eating it raw or combining it with other ingredients, the effects that appear are not listed anywhere on the standard ingredient database. The plant produces effects that exist in the game's alchemy system, but are not assigned to any other ingredient currently in the game. This either represents a unique ingredient with properties specific to the Forgotten Vale's isolated ecosystem, or it is a remnant of a broader alchemy system that was partially removed during development, leaving this one sample behind as the only accessible evidence that the effects ever existed. The Forgotten Vale has been sealed from the outside world for a very long time. Whatever grew there developed without outside influence. This plant is one result of that isolation. Blackreach is one of the largest underground spaces in the game. Most players move through it with a specific objective and cover a fraction of its full area. In a sealed section of Blackreach that functions as an alchemical laboratory, a space where Dwemer researchers conducted experiments on underground organisms, there is a jar. The jar contains chorus eggs, not a standard container of chorus eggs. A variant container, a sealed Dwemer preservation jar with a fitted lid and an internal atmosphere designed to keep biological samples stable. The eggs inside are the same ingredient as standard chorus eggs, but have been sealed in conditions that have preserved them for what may be thousands of years. The container does not respawn. Once the eggs are taken, they are gone from that location permanently. The sealed lab is not on the main path through Blackreach. It is in a side section that requires deliberate navigation through parts of the space most players skip. The jar sits on a research surface, among other Dwemer laboratory equipment, in a room that looks like it was last used a very long time ago and has not been disturbed since. In a Hagraven nest, a specific one, not a generic location, there is a bone meal sample. Bone meal is a common alchemy ingredient. It comes from bones, and Skyrim has no shortage of those. But this sample carries a tag identifying its source creature, and the creature listed does not exist in the current version of the game. The source tag references a creature type that was removed during development, an entity that was designed given a creature ID, had its bone meal drop assigned, and was then cut before the final release. The bone meal sample remained. It was placed in a Hagraven nest as part of a loot table that referenced a creature the game no longer contains. The Hagraven would have obtained it through the same means Hagravens obtain most things: through ritual, through scavenging, through trade with things that operate outside the normal ecology. The bone meal itself functions normally as an alchemy ingredient. Its effects are standard. Only the source tag is strange, pointing at a creature ID that has no living model in the game world, a ghost reference to something that existed only in an earlier version of Skyrim. Markarth's Understone Keep sits against the back wall of the city, built into the living rock. Its lower storage areas serve the keep's daily operation. Supplies, equipment, materials kept accessible, but out of the main corridors. In one of those storage sections, in a container that most players walking through Understone Keep would not stop to open, there is a single Daedra heart, not in a boss chest, not as a reward, sitting in a non-respawning storage container in a keep basement. Daedra hearts are valuable and relatively difficult to obtain through normal gameplay. Finding one in an unmarked storage container in a government building basement with no explanation attached is genuinely unusual. No NPC in Understone Keep references it. No quest points to it. The container does not refill. Once taken, no second one appears. Someone placed a Daedra heart in an Understone Keep storage container at some point during the game's design and gave it no context. Whether this was the beginning of something that was never finished, or a deliberate detail placed for a specific reason that was then left without explanation, is not clear. The heart is simply there, in the dark, in a container below a keep built inside a mountain. Salt piles are one of the most common items in the game. They appear everywhere: kitchens, alchemist shops, general stores, dungeon containers. Players accumulate them without trying. In a specific barrel, in the Solitude Castle kitchen, one barrel among several, in a kitchen that most players pass through during the main quest line without examining the containers carefully, there is a salt pile that is different. The weight tag reads differently from every other salt pile in the game. The texture tag references a slightly different visual asset. The difference is small enough that most players would not notice it by looking. It only becomes apparent through close examination of the item data or by noticing the weight discrepancy in the inventory. Whether this represents a different grade of salt, a higher quality, or differently sourced variety that ended up in the castle kitchen through a specific supply chain, or whether it is a development artifact, a tag applied incorrectly during placement that was never corrected, is not conclusively established. The barrel does not respawn. There is one of these salt piles in the game. It is in a kitchen barrel in Solitude Castle. It weighs slightly wrong and looks almost exactly like everything around it. Skyrim's alchemy system gives the impression of completeness. Ingredients are listed. Effects are catalogued. The system feels like a closed set of known things. But underneath that impression, in unmapped rooms and non-respawning containers, and sealed Dwemer jars and Hagraven nests, there are ingredients that do not fit cleanly into the catalogue. Samples placed once and never again. Things grown in isolated valleys with effects not listed anywhere. Bone meal from creatures the game no longer contains. Salt that weighs wrong. A toe twice as heavy as it should be. The system is not as closed as it appears. The world grows things in the dark that the catalogue never accounted for. They are still there, in their single containers, in their one locations, waiting to be found by someone looking closely enough to notice that something is slightly different from everything around it. Shalador lived during the First Era. He built Labyrinthian. He wrote treatises on magical theory that scholars still study. He argued with the Sigic Order and negotiated with Daedric princes, and shaped the College of Winterhold's early foundations. Most players know him from one quest, the Labyrinthian dungeon, the staff, the voice of a long-dead mage echoing through old stone. But Shalador did not confine himself to one place. He moved constantly across Skyrim, across a very long life. He left things where he went, not as gifts, not as traps, simply as a man who accumulated things and put them down in places that made sense to him at the time. 8 of those things are described here. None of them are part of any quest. Winterhold was important to Shalador. He shaped what became the college. He spent significant time in the region across different periods of his life. In a cave near Winterhold, not inside the college, not on the college's grounds, but in the rocky terrain surrounding the settlement, there is a sealed iron box. The box does not have a standard lock. There is no lock skill requirement attached to it. It does not respond to lockpicks. It simply does not open through any normal interaction the game provides. The lid has a seal pressed into it, a personal seal, not an institutional one, not the college's mark. A private mark used by Shalador on objects he considered personally significant. The seal's design appears on other Shalador-associated objects across the game world, always on things that were meant to stay closed until someone with the right knowledge approached them. What right knowledge would open this box is not documented anywhere in the game. No spell in the current magic system affects it. No NPC references it. It sits in a cave near Winterhold, sealed by something that is not a lock, with a mark on the lid that identifies exactly whose decision it was to keep it closed. The Arcanium's book collection is extensive. Urag Groshub maintains it carefully. Books are shelved, catalogued, and tracked. But the catalogue has gaps. Objects on shelves that were placed before Urag's tenure. Items that arrived through donation or inheritance without complete documentation. Tucked inside a book on one of the Arcanium's shelves, a book that appears from the outside to be a standard volume, nothing distinguished about its spine. There is a false back. The inner back cover of the book opens to a small pocket. Inside the pocket is a handwritten index. Shalador's handwriting is documented in the game through other items. The style is consistent across his known written materials. This index lists locations, not spell locations or artifact locations, travel locations, places Shalador visited, noted in a compact shorthand that mixes Tamrielic with an older notation system he apparently used for personal records. The index covers locations across Skyrim, High Rock, and at least 2 entries that refer to places not identifiable by any current geographical knowledge. It is not a map. It is a list, in a pocket, inside a false-backed book, on a shelf in a library that does not know it is there. Labyrinthian's entrance hall is the first space players pass through on the way into the dungeon. Most players move through it quickly. The quest pulls them forward. On a high shelf in that entrance hall, not in the main quest path, but visible from it, there is a glass orb, small enough to hold in one hand, clear glass, with something suspended at its center that does not move when the orb is tilted. The orb vibrates when carried into areas with active magical fields, near enchanting tables, near ward spells, near specific magical phenomena in certain dungeon environments. The vibration has no gameplay effect. It does not trigger any event. It does not alert enemies. It simply responds to magical fields, the way a compass responds to magnetic north, passively, consistently, without needing to be activated or maintained. Shalador built instruments for measuring magical field strength. This orb is one of those instruments, left on a shelf in the entrance hall of the place he built, functioning exactly as it was designed to function, for an audience that mostly walks past it without picking it up. Shalador visited Dwemer ruins. This is documented in his writings. He was interested in Dwemer magical theory, particularly in the ways the Dwemer channeled magicka through mechanical systems rather than biological ones. In a side chamber of Mazinchaleft, a Dwemer ruin northeast of Markarth, there is a set of measuring instruments. Small, precise, made from materials that are neither Dwemer nor standard Nordic manufacture. They are Shalador's. The design matches his known approach to magical measurement. Instruments built for portability and accuracy rather than display. These specific instruments measure magical field strength and direction. They were made for use in Dwemer ruins, where the ambient magical fields produced by still-functioning machinery create measurement conditions not found in surface environments. Shalador brought them to Mazinchaleft for research purposes and left them in a side chamber. Whether he intended to return for them is not recorded. The side chamber is not on the main path through Mazinchaleft. Most players who enter the ruin for its associated quest never reach it. The instruments sit on the chamber floor, precisely where Shalador set them down. Among the collapsed buildings of Old Winterhold, the part of the city that fell into the sea during the Great Collapse, there are structures that partially survived. Some of their interiors are still accessible. In a chest inside one of those collapsed buildings, there is a letter, wax-sealed. The seal is Shalador's personal mark, the same design pressed into the iron box near Winterhold's cave. The letter is addressed to no one. The address field on the front of the sealed letter is blank. A sealed letter with no recipient either lost its address when the outer wrapper was separated from it, or was written with the intention of remaining undelivered. The wax seal has not been broken. Whatever Shalador wrote inside this letter, he sealed it and left it in a chest in a Winterhold building that was then partially destroyed by the Great Collapse. Whether the letter was placed there before or after the collapse is not clear from the item's context. The building fell, the chest survived. The letter inside it stayed sealed. It has been sitting in that chest, addressed to no one, through everything that happened to Winterhold after Shalador's time. Hihal March is a hold most players pass through briefly. Its marshes and fog make it feel isolated, a place on the way to somewhere else, rather than a destination. In a cave in Hialmark, there is a chest with Shalador's seal on its latch. Inside is a single object, an item type that does not exist anywhere else in the game's standard system. A Magicka crystal, not a soul gem, not an enchanting component. A crystal that holds a charge of Magicka in a stored, stable form. The kind of object that theoretical magical texts describe, but that the game's crafting and enchanting systems do not include as a functional category. The crystal is described in its item text as unspent, meaning whatever charge it holds has not been used. Shalador wrote about the possibility of storing Magicka externally, outside the body, in a stable medium that could be drawn on later. Whether this crystal represents a successful attempt at that storage, or a failed prototype, or something else entirely, is not established anywhere. It is the only item of its type in the game. It sits in a sealed chest in a Hijilmarch cave, holding a charge that has apparently remained stable for as long as the chest has been there. Not everything Shalador left behind was significant. Powerful men also have headaches. In a locked wooden case, small, fitted with a simple latch lock, found in a location associated with Shalador's movement through Skyrim, there are dried herbs. The herbs have no alchemy effects listed in the standard ingredient table. They do not register as alchemical components at all. The case is labeled. The label is in Shalador's handwriting, the same hand that wrote the Arcanium Index, the same compressed notation style used across his personal records. The label reads, "For the headache." No other description, no ingredient name, no preparation instructions. Just a practical note from a man who apparently suffered from headaches and carried a case of dried herbs for them, in a locked case, as part of whatever he brought with him when he traveled. The herbs have dried past any point of preparation. Whatever they were made from has not been identified by any in-game alchemy system. Shalador traveled across Skyrim with these herbs, in a locked case, because something about his headaches required a locked case of specific dried plants. That detail exists in the game, and is explained by nothing except the label he wrote on the case himself. In Labyrinthian's secondary passage, not the main quest corridor, but a branching route that most players following the quest line never take, there is a trapdoor at floor level. It is easy to miss, because it sits flush with the stone floor and blends into the surface. The trapdoor opens. Below it is a small room. The room contains one thing, a locked chest. The chest is empty. Whatever it held is gone, or was never placed, or was removed at some point before the current version of the game. But the trapdoor itself carries something more interesting than what is below it. A spell is locked onto the door mechanism, not an enchantment in the standard sense, not a listed magical effect from the enchanting system. A spell that exists on the door as a persistent effect, active and present, that no dispel magic in the game affects. The spell does nothing visible. It does not harm anyone who touches the door. It does not trigger any event. It simply exists on the door, active and undispellable, in a secondary passage of a place Shalador built. He placed a permanent, irremovable spell on a trapdoor, leading to an empty room. Whether the room was meant to hold something that was never placed, or whether the spell on the door was the point all along, and the room beneath it is secondary, is not resolved anywhere in the game. The trapdoor sits in the passage floor. The spell stays on it. The room below holds nothing. Shalador lived long enough to leave things across most of Skyrim. A sealed box that will not open, a travel index in a false-backed book, an orb that vibrates near magic, a set of measuring instruments in a Dwemer ruin, an unaddressed letter in a collapsed building, a crystal holding a charge that should have dissipated centuries ago, a case of herbs for a headache, a trapdoor with a permanent spell over an empty room. Most of it has no explanation attached. Shalador did not leave explanations. He left objects, in places that made sense to him, for reasons that were his own. The objects are still there. The reasons went with him. King Olaf One-Eye ruled Skyrim during the First Era. His name appears in the Bard's College Festival, the Burning of King Olaf, and in a few scattered historical references. Most players encounter him briefly and move on. But Olaf was a king who ruled for long enough to accumulate things. Tribute came in from every hold he controlled. Not all of it was displayed publicly. Not all of it was recorded in official logs. Some of it was put away, in sealed passages and palace subrooms and warehouse niches, and the people who put it there eventually died or moved on, and the things they stored stayed exactly where they were left. 7 of those things are described here. None of them have been claimed by anyone in a very long time. Solitude has passages beneath its main streets and buildings that do not appear on any map available to players. Some of these passages were used for storage, practical spaces that allowed goods to move between buildings without going through public areas. In one sealed section of these passages, accessible but completely unmarked, requiring exploration without any guidance, there is a tribute chest. The chest is old. Its construction style is consistent with First-Era Nordic storage containers. Heavier wood, iron banding in a pattern that predates current metalworking conventions in Skyrim. Inside are coins. 3 different types, from 3 different holds. The coin types are identifiable by their minting style. 1 from the Rift, 1 from Eastmarch, 1 from Falkreath. These were tribute payments. Each hold sent coins as part of their obligation to Olaf's rule. They arrived at Solitude, were counted and stored in this chest, and were then sealed in a passage below the city when Olaf's administration changed or ended. No current map marks the passage. No current NPC references the chest. The coins inside have been sitting in that sealed space since the First Era, from 3 holds that paid what they owed to a king who has been dead for a very long time. In the Blue Palace, below the main residential and administrative levels, there are subrooms, secondary spaces, used for storage and household functions, that the palace's public-facing areas do not show. One of these subrooms is not visited by any quest. No NPC directs players to it. In that room, on a surface against the wall, there is a carved ivory piece. The ivory came from Eastmarch. The carving style is specific to that hold's tribute tradition under Olaf's rule, a formal presentation piece, made to a specific size and design that Olaf's court required from Eastern Hold contributions. Tribute of this type was not purely financial. Holds also sent worked objects, demonstrations of their craftspeople's skill and their hold's resources, offered as acknowledgement of the king's authority. This piece was carried from Eastmarch to Solitude, presented at Olaf's court, and then stored in a subroom below the palace. It has been there ever since. The ivory has not yellowed badly. It was kept in conditions that slowed that process. The carving is still detailed and clear. It represents a transaction between a hold and a king, completed in the First Era, sitting in a palace room that has mostly been forgotten. Falkreath has its own weaving tradition. Its textiles in the pre-Third Era period used a specific embroidery pattern, a design developed locally, distinct from patterns used in other holds, identifiable to anyone who knew what to look for. A length of cloth from Falkreath, embroidered in that pre-Third Era pattern, was sent to Solitude as tribute during Olaf's reign. It ended up in a Solitude manor chest, moved from the palace at some point into a nearby manor's storage, as large households often absorbed surplus palace goods when storage space shifted. The cloth is folded. The embroidery pattern runs along one edge in a style that no current Falkreath textile shows. The specific plant dye colors used to produce the thread's hues were sourced from Falkreath's forest, a dyeing tradition that changed significantly after the First Era as trade routes brought outside dye sources into the hold. The colors in this cloth are the old ones, produced from old sources, specific to a period of Falkreath craft production that ended long ago. The cloth was sent as tribute, and stored and moved, and stored again, until it ended up folded in a manor chest in Solitude, representing a version of Falkreath that Falkreath itself no longer remembers. Tribute had to be managed. Olaf's court employed revenue collectors, officials who travelled between holds, assessed what was owed, received payments and goods, and logged everything. One of those logs still exists. It was written by one of Olaf's revenue collectors, covering a specific circuit of holds during a specific period of Olaf's reign. The log is sealed, rolled and tied, not a bound book, and was stored in a niche in the wall of a Solitude warehouse. The niche is at a low level, near the floor, behind a shelf that partially obscures it. A player who searches the warehouse carefully, moving the shelf or looking behind it, finds the log. The handwriting is dense and practical, a working official's record, not a narrative. It lists hold names, tribute amounts, dates of receipt, and occasional notes about disputes or shortfalls. The final entry is incomplete. It stops mid-sentence. Whatever interrupted the revenue collector while writing that last entry is not explained. The log stayed in the warehouse niche. The shelf moved in front of it at some point. The incomplete last entry has been sitting there since the First Era, unfinished. The pail is a cold hold. Its tribute under Olaf reflected its resources. Not gold, not ivory, not fine cloth, but steel. Specifically, a tribute blade. A knife of unusual craft, made by a pale smith and sent to Solitude as ceremonial payment. Not a weapon for use, but a demonstration of what the Hold's craftspeople could produce. Tribute blades of this type were displayed in halls as acknowledgement of the relationship between Hold and King. This one sits in a blue palace display alcove. No NPC comments on it. No display label identifies it. It occupies a small space in the alcove, the way decorative objects occupy spaces in large buildings. Present, ignored, belonging to a context that has long since dissolved. The blade itself is well made. Its steel is First Era quality, a slightly different composition than current Skyrim steel, produced through methods that have since shifted. The Pale sent this blade to Olaf's court. His court displayed it. Everyone who knew what it was and why it was there has been dead for centuries. The blade sits in the alcove, still well made, in a palace that has reorganized itself around it without ever removing it. Riften had brewing families. Some of them operated for generations, producing mead with specific recipes and specific reputations. One of those families no longer exists. Their name appears in old records, but their line ended at some point, and their brewery with it. During Olaf's reign, that family sent sealed jars of mead as tribute. One of those jars ended up in the Blue Palace cellar. It has been there ever since. The seal is intact. The jar is a type used by that specific family, a distinctive shape with a specific clay composition sourced from the Rift. No other Riften brewery used this exact jar design. The mead inside has been aging in a Blue Palace wine cellar for what may be the better part of 1,000 years or more. Whether what is inside is still mead in any meaningful sense after that time is not established anywhere. The jar is sealed. The family that made it is gone. The palace cellar holds it the way it holds everything else in its collection, without particularly noting what is ordinary and what is not. This jar is not ordinary. There is simply no one left who knows that. Political tribute was not always comfortable. Holds sent goods to Olaf's court because they had to. Some jarls accepted this willingly, others did not. In a Solitude storeroom, A working storage space, not a formal archive. There is a letter. It is stuffed behind a loose stone in the wall. Not stored, hidden. The loose stone was not loose when the letter was placed there. It was worked loose deliberately. The letter was pushed into the gap, and the stone was replaced. Someone who knew that storeroom well hid this letter in its wall. The letter is from a Falkreath Jarl. It is addressed to Olaf personally. It is unsigned. A Jarl writing to a king without signing the letter was writing something they did not want attributed to them. The letter's tone, readable, but not fully quoted in any in-game source, is apparently private, in the way that correspondence between people with a complicated relationship is private, not official, not a political document, something personal, written between two people who had a history that the official tribute records do not reflect. The stone was replaced. The letter stayed behind it. The storeroom has changed functions several times since the first era. The stone held. Olaf One-Eye is remembered mostly as a figure in a festival, a name on a poem, an old king who did something significant, and then became the subject of a ceremony that mostly involves burning an effigy. The things his reign actually produced, the tribute flows, the records, the objects that moved from hold to hold as acknowledgement of his authority, those are mostly forgotten. They sit in sealed passages and palace subrooms and warehouse niches and storeroom walls in the city he ruled from. The holds that sent them have reorganized around different relationships and different rulers. The objects they sent remain, in the dark, in the way that tribute remains when the authority that demanded it is long gone, unclaimed, uncounted, still exactly where they were put. Skyrim is a large world. Most of it can be explored, but not all of it. Some spaces in the game exist in a state between present and inaccessible, visible through geometry, documented in the game's files, physically present in the world, but placed in locations where normal movement cannot reach them. A chest on the wrong side of a gate, a barrel clipped into a wall, a room with a door on every map and no door in the actual game. Objects in these locations were placed by developers during construction and then left when the path to them was closed or removed or simply never finished. They are still there. They exist. They simply cannot be reached by anyone playing the game the way it was designed to be played. Morthal sits in Hajalmarch's marshes. The lake near it is deep. Deeper than the swimming and diving mechanics of the game allow players to navigate fully. At the bottom of that lake, in the deepest section where the water goes dark and the surface becomes invisible above, there is a chest. It sits in the silt. It is locked. It contains a leveled item, an item whose specific contents are generated based on the player's level at the time of discovery, which means the game expects it to be discovered. The mechanic that generates its contents is designed for a player who opens the chest. But the chest sits deeper than any player can dive without drowning. The swimming system does not provide enough breadth or depth capability to reach it through normal play. The chest was placed at that depth during development, perhaps when an underwater breathing mechanic was being considered, perhaps simply as part of a dense loot placement that did not account for depth limits. The leveled item inside it is generated and waiting. The chest sits in the dark water below Morthal, in silt that has not been disturbed since the last time a developer's camera moved through it. Mazin Kaleft has a gate. Most Dwemer ruins have gates, heavy metal barriers, operated by levers or pressure plates that control access through the facility. This particular gate has a lever mechanism that is present in the game's architecture. The slot where the lever should sit is visible in the wall beside the gate. The lever itself is not there. The slot is empty. The gate does not open through any normal interaction. Through the bars of the closed gate, a sealed box is visible. It sits on a surface in the space beyond the gate, close enough to see clearly, far enough that no interaction prompt appears when standing at the gate. The lever that would open this gate was apparently removed during development. Whether the gate was originally planned to open as part of a quest that was cut, or whether the lever was simply never placed in the final version of the ruin, is not established. The box beyond the gate is visible. It has been visible to every player who has moved through that section of Mazin Kaleft. The gate between them has been closed since the game launched. Riften's Ratway is mapped. It has a layout documented in the game's internal architecture. On that layout, in a section of the Ratway that does not align with a standard navigable space, there is a room marked with a door. The door appears on internal maps as a functional entry point. In the actual navigable game space, the door does not exist. The wall where the door should be is solid. The room behind it is present in the game's geometry. It was built. It exists in the files. It has walls and a floor and a ceiling and dimensions. Inside that room, on a wall rack, there is a set of armor pieces. The rack is mounted. The armor is hung on it correctly. The room containing them simply has no door that can be opened from the navigable Ratway. Players cannot enter it through normal movement. The armor sits on its rack in a room with a missing door, in a section of the Ratway that the game's maps acknowledge as existing, but that the game's actual geography makes unreachable. The path up toward High Hrothgar runs along the mountain face. It is a long climb with switchbacks and stone steps and occasional sheltered sections. Above one of those sections, above the highest point accessible from the normal path, there is a cliff ledge. The ledge is real. It exists as geometry. It has a surface that could be stood on. There is a chest on it. The chest contains a shield. The shield is tagged as unique. It has item properties that do not match any shield available through normal gameplay, or any merchant, or any quest reward. Reaching the ledge requires either console commands or movement exploits that go outside normal gameplay parameters. The chest was placed on that ledge during development. The shield inside it was tagged unique. No quest connects to either the ledge or the chest. No path up to the ledge was ever built into the normal movement space. The unique shield has been sitting on a ledge above the throat of the world path since the game launched, in a chest that the game's designers placed there and then left without providing any legitimate means of reaching it. Solitude's Harbour Warehouse is a functional space. Cargo arrives, is stored, and is distributed. The warehouse has corners and angles where geometry meets in ways that can produce clipping, spaces where objects overlap with wall surfaces and become partially embedded in the architecture. In one corner of the harbour warehouse, a barrel is clipped into the wall, not leaning against it, inside it, partially. The barrel's interaction surface is embedded in the wall geometry in a way that makes the normal interaction prompt unavailable from any angle a player can approach from. The barrel exists. Its contents exist in the game's item data, but the angle required to trigger an interaction with it does not correspond to any position a player can reach through normal movement. Whether the barrel was placed too close to the wall during development and the overlap was not caught, or whether a later geometry update shifted the wall into the barrel's position, is not established. The barrel is there. Its contents are there. The wall is also there. All three have been in that configuration since the game launched. Blackreach covers a vast underground space. Its northern sections are the least traveled, far from the main quest objectives and the most significant landmarks. In the far northern part of Blackreach, there is a hanging lantern. Blackreach's lighting is distinctive. The bioluminescent fungi and the Dwemer light sources produce an orange-amber glow that colors the entire underground space. This lantern is different. It glows blue-white, not faintly, not as a slight variation, distinctly blue-white, in a space where every other light source produces orange or amber. The lantern hangs from the ceiling of the northern section, at a height that cannot be reached through normal movement. No ladder, no climbable surface leading to it. The chain it hangs from is anchored in the ceiling geometry. The lantern itself has no item interaction. It cannot be taken or examined. It simply hangs there, producing a blue-white light that matches nothing else in Blackreach, in the section of the underground space that most players never reach, because nothing in the game directs them there. No explanation exists for the color difference in any in-game source. Erkenthand is a Dwemer ruin associated with the Thieves' Guild questline. Players who move through it follow the main path. Side passages branch off that path, and most players do not take them. In one of those side passages, on a stone pedestal, there is a book. It is placed face down. A book placed face down on a pedestal in a Dwemer ruin is already unusual. Most books in Dwemer ruins are placed upright, or on shelves, or in containers. This one is face down, which means the cover that normally identifies the book is facing the pedestal surface and cannot be seen from above. The cover design, visible only if the player manipulates the camera to look upward at the book's face from below the pedestal, uses artwork that does not match any other book cover in the game's item system. Every other book cover in Skyrim uses one of a set of standard designs applied across multiple titles. This cover is different, a design that appears on no other book anywhere in the game. The book can be picked up and read. Its contents are standard. The cover design that makes it unique is only visible when the book is in its placed position, face down on a pedestal, in a side passage of a ruin most players never fully explore. Skyrim's world was built by many hands over a long period of development. Spaces were constructed, changed, repurposed, and sometimes simply left in states that the final version of the game neither fully completed nor removed. The chest below Morthal was meant to be found. The lever beside the Mazincha gate was meant to be placed. The door to the Ratway room was meant to be built. The path to the cliff ledge was meant to exist. At some point in development, each of these things was moving toward completion and then stopped. The objects stayed. The paths to them did not. They exist in a part of the game world that is present but not accessible, seen through bars and water and geometry and impossible height, holding things that were placed with the expectation that someone would eventually reach them. No one has. Not through normal play. The game keeps moving around them, and they stay exactly where they were left. Most things in Skyrim are always there. A chest sits in a dungeon. It holds what it holds. The player finds it or does not. But some things in Skyrim are not always there. Some objects only enter the world after something else ends, after a specific person dies, after a specific chain of decisions removes someone from their position, after a betrayal that most players never commit. The game does not announce these changes. No notification appears. A chest quietly unlocks. A panel slides open. An item appears on a desk that was empty the day before. 7 of those changes are described here, and the things that become available after the people connected to them are gone. Arcadia runs her alchemy shop in Whiterun for most players' entire playthroughs. She sells standard ingredients and potions. She offers a minor quest. She stands behind her counter and conducts business. Most players never harm her. In the back area of Arcadia's cauldron, there is a lockbox. While Arcadia is alive, it does not open. No lockpick works on it. No key in the game corresponds to its lock while she breathes. After her death, the lockbox becomes accessible. Inside are notes. Not the kind of notes a merchant writes for restocking or sales tracking. Personal notes, written in a compressed hand, covering a poison formula that Arcadia never offered for sale and never discussed with any NPC in the game. The formula involves combining ingredients in a sequence and ratio that the standard alchemy interface does not suggest. It produces an effect not achievable through normal alchemy experimentation. Arcadia apparently developed this formula privately and kept it locked away from her public business entirely. Whether she intended it for personal use, for a specific client, or simply as private research she had no reason to share, is not explained anywhere. The notes sit in the lockbox behind her counter, available only after she no longer needs them kept private. Dawnstar's Jarl occupies his position at the start of the game. He has his quarters, he has his routine, he has possessions in his personal space that belong to his tenure in that role. Players who complete the Civil War questline on the Imperial side remove him from power. Most players do not complete the Civil War fully. They start it, progress partway, and leave it unresolved. Players who do complete it and remove the Jarl find something in his quarters afterward. A personal item cache that was not there while he held his position. Not a dramatic discovery. Not gold or weapons. Personal effects. Objects that represent his time in that role, rather than anything immediately useful. A carved piece given to him by someone whose name is not in any dialogue. A folded document that is not a political record, but something private. A small container of personal items that a man keeps near him when he holds power and that becomes visible only when he no longer does. The cache does not appear on any map. No quest directs players to it. Most players who complete the Imperial side of the Civil War never check the former Jarl's quarters carefully enough to find it. Farengar's Secret Fire serves as court mage in Whiterun's Dragon's Reach. He is involved in the main quest early on. Players interact with him, receive an objective, and generally treat him as a functional NPC, rather than a person with a private life. Killing Farengar requires betraying Whiterun, an action the game allows, but that most players never take. It removes the city's cooperation and closes off certain options. Most players consider this a bad outcome and avoid it entirely. After Farengar's death, his desk changes. A set of research notes appears on it that was not there while he was alive. These notes cover magical theory, specifically, theory about a topic Farengar was apparently working on privately, outside his official duties for the Jarl. The notes are specific and technical. They represent genuine research in progress, not finished conclusions but working thoughts, mid-process, the kind of material a mage produces while actively pursuing a question. Farengar was thinking about something he had not told anyone about. He kept those notes off his desk while he was present. After he is gone, they appear, as if the space around him reorganized itself to show what he had been doing when no one was watching. Elgrim runs his alchemy shop in Riften. He is difficult to deal with. His relationship with his wife, who also works in the shop, is strained enough that it forms a minor story thread for players who spend time there. Most players buy what they need and leave. The back of Elgrim's shop contains a sealed chest that remains locked for the entirety of his life. After his death, the chest opens. Inside is a scroll, a single alteration scroll, but not a scroll of any alteration spell currently taught by any trainer in the game or sold by any merchant in Skyrim. The spell on the scroll is an alteration effect that exists in the game's magic system, but has no standard acquisition path. Elgrim apparently obtained or created this scroll and kept it in a sealed chest in the back of his shop, unsold and undiscussed, for reasons he shared with no one. Alteration magic manipulates the physical properties of the world, weight, solidity, the behavior of objects and space. What specifically Elgrim intended to do with a unique alteration scroll he never sold and never mentioned is not recorded. The chest stays locked while he lives. It opens when he does not. Mistvale Keep is Riften's Jarl Hall. Its interior reflects the current political situation of the Rift. Who holds power? Who has recently held it? What has changed? Completing a specific chain of Riften political events, a sequence most players begin but do not finish entirely, causes a hidden panel in Mistvale Keep to unlock. The panel is set into a wall in a secondary area of the keep. While the political situation that makes it accessible has not been resolved, the panel blends into the wall surface and cannot be interacted with. After the sequence completes and the power dynamics in the keep shift, the panel opens. Behind it are items from the personal collection of whoever previously held the dominant position in that space. Not official items, not weapons or political documents. Personal objects, the kind that accumulate around a person in power and reflect who they are, rather than what their role requires. The previous occupant did not take them when they left. Either they left in circumstances that did not allow packing, or these items were stored there deliberately as something separate from what they carried out. The panel holds what they left behind. Lydia is a housecarl. She follows the player. She carries things and fights things, and stands in Bree's home waiting when the player is elsewhere. Most players treat her as a functional companion. Very few players kill her deliberately. Bree's home has a basement, a lower level that receives less attention than the main living areas. After Lydia's death, an item appears in that basement. A personal diary, not a combat log, not a record of service. A diary of the kind a person writes privately about their own life. Observations, memories, thoughts about her situation before she became a housecarl, reflections on what she left behind to take that role. The game establishes through this diary that Lydia had a life before the player arrived, and a perspective on her service that she never expressed in any dialogue with the player. She was apparently writing about it privately. The diary appears in the basement, only after she is gone. Players who find it after killing Lydia, whether accidentally or deliberately, discover that she was a person with more interior life than any of her voiced lines suggest. The basement is quiet when the diary appears. The rest of Bree's home continues normally above it. The Temple of Mara in Riften handles marriages. Its priests conduct ceremonies. Players who use the temple for its mechanical function, acquiring an amulet of Mara, completing a wedding, interact with it as a functional space. One of the temple's priests has a storage trunk in the building. While that priest is alive, the trunk does not open through normal interaction. After the priest's death, which requires the player to act against them, something most players never do, the trunk opens. Inside are items used in a ceremony that is never shown anywhere in the game. Not the standard wedding ceremony players can attend. A different ceremony, one connected to Mara's domain in a way that goes beyond the marriage mechanic the game uses. The items are ritual objects, specific materials, arranged in a way that suggests a formal sequence of use. No in-game text describes the ceremony they were used for. No NPC in the temple acknowledges the ceremony's existence. The priest kept these items locked in a personal trunk and performed whatever the ceremony was, without it appearing anywhere in the game's documented religious content. The trunk stays closed while the priest is present. What they did privately stays private until they are gone. Every person in Skyrim holds something close while they are alive. Keep something locked, keep something off the desk, keep something in a panel behind a wall, or a trunk in a temple basement. The game world accommodates this. It keeps those things inaccessible, while the people who need them inaccessible are still present. When those people are gone, the world quietly adjusts. A lock releases. A panel opens. Something appears on a desk that was not there before. The world does not announce these changes. It simply makes them, quietly. The way things become available after, not as reward, not as punishment, just as the natural result of someone no longer being there to keep them close. Skyrim feels like a fixed world. The mountains stay where they are. The cities hold their shape. Objects sit in containers and remain there until someone takes them. But underneath that feeling of permanence, some things in Skyrim move on a different schedule. A chest that is empty at noon holds something at midnight. A barrel that has nothing in clear weather holds something specific in the rain. A wall niche that is bare in daylight has a sealed letter after dark. The world follows its own quiet rhythms, moon phases and weather patterns, and the turning of the in-game clock, and certain objects only exist within those rhythms. Most players check a location once and walk away. They do not return at a different hour or in different weather. 7 objects tied to these rhythms are described here. None of them are always there. Most of them have never been found at all. Azura's shrine sits on a mountain south of Winterhold. Players who complete her quest line, climb to it, receive her task, return, and receive their reward. Most players never return to the shrine's surrounding area after the quest closes. Near the shrine, not on the main path, but in the rocky terrain around it, there is a chest. On most days, and in most conditions, the chest is empty. During a full moon, it is not. The item it holds during full moon conditions is a small object connected to Azura's domain, the boundary between day and night, the movement between states. Azura governs dusk and dawn, the moments of transition. The full moon is one of those transitional markers in Tamrielic religious tradition, a specific point in a cycle that Azura's worship acknowledges as significant. The chest reflects that acknowledgement. It holds something during the full moon, and nothing during any other phase. Players who check it on a clear afternoon or a new moon night find nothing and assume the chest is empty. It is not always empty. The shrine's mountain is quiet between visits. The chest opens and closes its contents on its own schedule, whether anyone is watching or not. Whiterun's market district operates during daylight hours. Merchants stand at their stalls and conduct business from morning until evening. After hours, the market is quiet. The stalls are empty of vendors. under the counter tray of one specific market stall, in the space beneath the display surface where a merchant stores small items during the day. A ring appears between midnight and 3 in the morning, in-game time. During market hours, during evening hours, during any time outside that 3-hour window, the ring is not there. The ring itself is small and has properties not listed in any standard merchant inventory in Whiterun. Where it comes from and where it goes when the window closes is not explained by any in-game system. The merchant who operates that stall has no dialogue about it. No NPC references its appearance or disappearance. Whether its placement is connected to something the merchant does privately during the night, or whether it represents something left and collected by a third party on a schedule the game does not explain, is not established. The market district is quiet after midnight. The ring appears under the counter in the dark, sits there for 3 hours, and is gone by morning. The Temple of Dibella in Markarth holds a locked cabinet in one of its interior rooms. The cabinet can be opened. Its lock is a standard difficulty. What makes it unusual is not whether it can be opened, but what is inside when it is opened. The cabinet holds a prayer object, a small ritual item used in Dibella's worship. The object inside the cabinet changes based on the time of day when the cabinet is opened. In the morning hours, the cabinet holds one type of prayer object. In the evening and night hours, it holds a different one. The two objects represent different aspects of Dibella's domain. Her worship addresses multiple dimensions of what she governs, and different ritual objects correspond to different aspects of her attention. The temple's priests are apparently aware of this. They open the cabinet at specific times for specific purposes. A player who opens the cabinet at random does not see both objects unless they open it twice, at different times of day, with enough of a gap between visits to let the contents shift. Most players open it once and consider it found. The second object remains unseen. Lake Ilinalta sits in Falkreath Hold. It is large and cold, and has a submerged structure in its depths, connected to a quest line. Along the lakeshore, there are fishing barrels, containers used by those who work the lake. One of those barrels, in a specific position near the shore, behaves differently than its neighbors. In clear weather, it holds standard loot, the kind of generic contents that unremarkable containers hold across the game. During rain, it holds something else. A single unique item appears in it, only when the weather system is running a rain condition over that area. The item is small and specific, in a way that connects it to the lake itself, to the water, and what the water represents in that location. Rain on a lake is a different condition than sun on a lake. The barrel reflects that distinction. Players who check it in clear weather note the generic contents and move on. Players who happen to check it while it is raining in Falkreath Hold, and who happen to think to look in a fishing barrel during the rain, find something that is not always there. The rain in Falkreath Hold comes often enough. The barrel sits at the waterline and waits for it. Windhelm's alleys run between its stone buildings in narrow passages that most players move through quickly on the way to somewhere else. In one of those alleys, at roughly chest height in the stone wall, there is a niche, a small recessed space in the wall surface. During the day, the niche is empty. After dark, once the in-game clock moves past a specific evening hour, a sealed letter appears in it. The letter references a meeting, not a meeting connected to any current quest in the game, not a meeting between any NPCs currently present in Windhelm's population. The meeting referenced in the letter involves a location, a time, and 2 names. One of the names belongs to a Windhelm NPC. The other name does not match any NPC currently in the game. Either the second party to the meeting is someone whose NPC was cut during development, leaving the letter behind as the only evidence they were planned, or the name refers to someone who passes through Windhelm on a schedule the game tracks without making visible. The letter appears in the niche after dark and is gone before morning. The alley is quiet at night. The niche holds its letter for a few hours and then holds nothing again. A sealed box in a Riften warehouse holds different things depending on the state of the Thieves' Guild questline. Before the questline begins, when the guild is in its weakened state, operating from the Ragged Flagon, the box holds one set of items. After the questline is completed, and the guild is restored to its former standing, the box holds a different set. The shift happens without announcement. No NPC mentions the box. No quest step references it. The warehouse is a commercial space that the guild has influence over, and the contents of the box reflect the guild's current capacity and reach. When the guild is weak, the box holds less. When the guild is strong, it holds more, and different things, reflecting access to a wider network. A player who checks the box before starting the questline, and again after completing it, finds genuinely different contents both times. Most players check it once, at whatever point they happen to pass through the warehouse, and take whatever is inside. The box adjusts its contents to the state of the world around it, quietly, without being asked. Near Rorikstead, the small farming settlement in the center of Skyrim, there is a roadside cairn. A cairn is a stack of stones placed deliberately, used across many cultures in Tamriel as a marker. This cairn looks like all the others along Skyrim's roads, a small pile of stones that players walk past without a second look. During a specific weather condition, a particular type of storm that the game's weather system generates in that area, the cairn becomes interactive. A small compartment becomes accessible in its base. Inside is a coin purse and a note. The note is short. It references a name and a direction and a date that does not correspond to any current in-game event. The compartment closes again when the weather changes. Players who pass this cairn in clear weather, in rain, in fog, in snow, in any condition except the specific one, pass a pile of stones. Players who pass it during the right storm find something inside. The storm comes and goes. The compartment opens and closes with it. The note inside references something that happened or was planned to happen, written by someone who knew this cairn and trusted it to hold their message in the right weather and show it to the right person. Skyrim runs on rhythms that most players never notice. The moon moves through its phases. The weather shifts across the holds on its own patterns. The in-game clock turns through its hours, whether the player is watching it or not. Some objects in the world are tied to those rhythms, appearing and disappearing, changing and returning, on schedules that have nothing to do with what the player is doing. They are not hidden in the conventional sense. They are simply only present sometimes. A player who looks in the right place at the wrong time finds nothing and assumes there is nothing to find. The chest near Azura's shrine is empty most nights. The ring under the market counter is gone by morning. The letter in the Windhelm niche disappears before sunrise. The world keeps its own time. These objects keep it with the world. There is no grand conclusion to draw from everything described in this script. No pattern that ties a Riemann Imperial dispatch box to a carved wooden horse in a burned house. No thread connecting an Aeliad drinking vessel to a ribbon tied to a tree with no explanation. The objects in this final chapter are not here because they are powerful or significant in the ways Skyrim's systems define significance. They are here because they are still here, because something made them, or placed them, or left them behind, and then time moved on, and they did not. 5 objects. Each one, the last remaining evidence of something that is otherwise completely gone. Helgen burned. Players who begin the game there watch it happen. The chaos, the escape, the absence of anything they can do about the destruction. Players who return to Helgen afterward find ruins, burned structures, emptied buildings. In one of those buildings, a house in the residential part of the town, in a section that was not completely destroyed, there is a small carved wooden horse. It is sitting on the floor near where a child's sleeping space would have been. The item has no owner listed in the game's system. The child who played with this horse does not appear as a named NPC anywhere in the game. They are not in any dialogue. They did not escape as a named survivor. The horse is the only evidence that they existed, a small carved toy in the ruins of a house in a town that was destroyed before the player ever had a chance to know who lived there. The wood has been slightly scorched. The carving is still clear enough to see what it depicts. Someone made this for a child. The child is not in the game anymore. The horse is. Riverwood is the first settlement most players reach after escaping Helgen. It is small and functional, and easy to treat as a waypoint rather than a place. In a chest in Riverwood, a storage chest in a building that is not prominently featured in any quest, there is a sealed letter. The letter is addressed to a name, not a famous name. Not a named NPC who appears anywhere in the game. The name on this letter belongs to no character in any dialogue, no named body in any location, no entry in any book or loading screen. It is simply a name on a letter addressed to someone who does not appear anywhere in Skyrim's world. The letter is sealed. Its contents are not visible through the item description. Someone wrote this letter to someone and placed it or left it in a Riverwood chest, expecting it to be found or collected by the person it was meant for. That person is not in the game. Whether they were planned and removed, or whether they lived in Riverwood before the events of the game and are simply gone by the time the player arrives, is not established anywhere. The letter has been in that chest since before the player's story began. The name on it belongs to no one the player will ever meet. Yarlmarch has ruins that do not appear on the map. The marshland and fog of that hold hide structures that were built and then abandoned long enough ago that no one marks them anymore. In one of those unmapped ruins, accessible but completely undirected, requiring exploration without any guidance, there is a single candle in a holder. The candle has not burned down. It is fully intact. The same height a new candle starts at, the wick untouched. A candle left in a ruin should have burned down long ago, or melted in heat, or been taken by whoever passed through last. This one is fully intact. It has no enchantment tag. No magical effect preserves it. It simply sits in its holder, in an unmapped ruin in the Yarlmarch marsh, intact, as if placed recently by someone who intended to come back and light it. No one has lit it. No one has taken it. It stands in its holder, in a ruin that no map acknowledges, complete and untouched, in a hold that the rest of Skyrim mostly passes through on the way to somewhere else. Why it is still there is not explained anywhere. It simply is. Near Lakeview Manor, the Hearthfire home that players can build in Falkreath Hold, there is a tree. The tree is part of the landscape, unremarkable in the way that Falkreath's forest is full of unremarkable trees. On one of this tree's lower branches, there is a ribbon, tied carefully, not hanging loose, but knotted in a way that suggests someone tied it with care and intention. The ribbon has an enchantment tag. The enchantment has no listed effect in the game's system. The tag exists, and its label reads, Remembrance. That is the entire description of the enchantment, not a mechanical effect, not a resistance or a damage bonus or a skill improvement. Just a word, Remembrance. Someone tied a ribbon to a branch near where Lakeview Manor can be built, gave it an enchantment with no effect beyond its name, and left it there. The tree was there before the manor. The ribbon was there before any player built on that land. Whatever remembrance it was tied there to hold, the game does not explain. The ribbon stays on the branch. The enchantment holds its label. The effect remains unlisted. It simply says what it is, and does nothing else, which may be exactly what it was meant to do. The path up toward the base of the Throat of the World is long. Players walk it at least once, sometimes multiple times across a playthrough. On the highest point accessible from the normal path, before the mountain becomes technical climbing, there is a stone, hand-sized, smooth, sitting on a flat surface at the path's highest reachable point. It has no name in the item system, no weight, no description. It does not register as a standard game object with an item tag. It exists in the game world as a placed piece of geometry, something that was put there deliberately, but that the item system does not classify or describe. Someone placed it at the highest point a person can normally reach on the path toward the Throat of the World. Not at the top, not at a named location. At the highest point of the ordinary path, the furthest most people go before the mountain becomes something else. The stone has no explanation. It cannot be picked up. It cannot be interacted with. It sits at the edge of what is reachable, and it has no name, and it weighs nothing, and it was placed by someone who had a reason, and left no record of what that reason was. Tamriel keeps moving. The holds change. The people who lived in Helgen are mostly gone. The name on the Riverwood letter belongs to no one currently present. The child with the wooden horse is not in the game. The candle in the Hazel March ruin stays unlit. The ribbon says remembrance and does nothing. The stone sits at the top of what is reachable and goes unnamed. None of these things are important to the main story. None of them are part of any quest. They are simply what remains when everything else has moved on. The wooden horse, the sealed letter, the intact candle, the ribbon with one word for an enchantment, the stone with no name at the edge of the reachable world. They are still here. Everything that placed them is gone. The objects stayed. That is the only thing they have in common. And in a world as large and as old as Skyrim, that turns out to be enough. Rest now. The world keeps turning without needing you to watch it. The objects stay where they are. The candle stays unlit. The stone sits at the high point of the path. And somewhere in that long, slow world, in the dark of a Hjalmarch ruin, in a burned house in Helgen, in a riverwood chest with a letter addressed to no one, something waits quietly to be found by someone who is looking closely enough. You do not need to find it tonight. Tonight, you rest.